All right. That's like the bell at school when we hear that little automated voice. So let's call the meeting to order at 6:00 p.m. First item on the agenda is roll call.
Nyla Fry,
Here.
Trisha Brown,
Here.
Sam Kaufman,
Here.
Kristen Runge,
Here.
Aaron Moran,
Here.
Joseph Sperger,
Here.
Robert McPherson.
Here.
Right, next item on the agenda is confirmation of open meeting compliance.
I can confirm that the draft agenda was published in the Waunakee Tribune on 10/18. The final agenda was posted in all 3 official posting locations on 10/16 and 10/17. And the final agenda and packet were made available online on 10/16. Just 2 reminders for the audience. Please be sure you sign in on the sign-in sheet with your name, address, and municipality for accurate record keeping. And anybody that has public comment, please submit the form to me prior to that agenda item.
All right, next item up then is public comment. Do we have any public comment from anyone in the audience? If you're online and would like to make a public comment, please raise your hand or click the button to raise your hand and we will call you into the meeting. No one in the audience who received any cards? And no one online? All right, last call. All right. And we will close public comment. Today we have a joint agenda item with the Finance Committee, and so I'd like to turn the meeting over to the Chair of the Finance Committee.
Thank you. So I will call the Finance Committee meeting to order. I don't see it on the agenda, but let's do a roll call.
Yeah, I think I forgot that.
Yep.
Paul-
A quick reminder about your buttons to be registered for that.
Yep, press it for green. Paul Cardarella,
Here.
Tom Wilson,
Here.
Sarah Whitley,
Here.
Al Dasso,
Here.
Joe Zitzelsberger,
Here.
Robert McPherson,
Here.
Kristen Runge.
Here.
All righty, we will move on to item 2 here. It's discuss and take action on Village of Waunakee budget policies. Renee, I think you're presenting?
Yes.
Okay.
For many years, the village has had a number of budget policies. And so I'm not going to go over those in great detail. I'm happy to answer any questions, but I did want to talk about a couple things, including update to one of the policies and then a new suggested policy regarding the senior center fund balance. So just first to touch on a policy we talk about a lot is the fund balance policy to keep between 20 and 25% of the unassigned fund balance on hand. And last year we had a couple different discussions at the board level and the finance committee level, and we had decided just to leave that the same at this point. The board did not want to pursue a change. So I just wanted to point that one out. Another slight change on the capital improvements. This is on page 6 of your packet. The fund balance or the annual pay-as-you-go capital transportation expenditures. Now we're asking it to be funded at a level of $1,350,000. That's an increase of $100,000 to add to the trails pay-as-you-go. And when Bill talks about his department, he's going to elaborate a little bit on why that is proposed. Otherwise, all the budget policies, I'm not proposing any changes. I think they've worked well for a number of, well, probably decades. I think they've been in place. But one thing I did want to talk about is the senior center fund balance. In proposing a policy to return any excess over a certain amount to the general fund. So just a little background, the senior center and the village center and some of our other funds are called special revenue funds. And what that means is that there's a major funding source besides tax levy that helps those funds. A perfect example is like the Housing Betterment Fund that is not funded by tax levy. It has another source and that retains its fund balance for that purpose until it's used up or, more is added to it. But the village center has user fees and the senior center has user fees, grants, that type of thing, but they also receive tax levy funding. And so we don't like to see that get, build up an enormous fund balance, because we could be, called out for overtaxing, because they're primarily funded with, well, somewhat funded by other sources. So the Village Center has had a policy where they keep, and I included it in your packet, they can keep some funds on hand because they are responsible for all of their own equipment replacement. So they have kind of a pot of money that they can keep for that. And then kind of a rainy day fund of 50,000. And over that, the policy has them make a transfer over to the debt service fund to pay down the debt that's still outstanding for the Village Center. So that's been in place since prior to when I got here. But there was never really anything in place similar for the senior center. And we did notice, it was starting to build up a little bit. And so I thought maybe we needed a similar policy for the senior center. So I was proposing a rainy day fund of not to exceed 10,000, and then any other board carryovers. So if they can't spend something by the end of the year and they request a carryover, they can also keep that for the next year. But after that, the excess would be returned to the general fund. And this is very common for special revenue funds that are tax levy supported in part. And then if they have a shortfall, they do have a senior center fundraising fund where they sell greeting cards and some snacks and things. So there's a little bit of money in there that could be used to help if there was a shortfall, or worst case, the general fund is the fallback if they were ever short in a year. So I'm happy to answer any questions on that or any other policy questions.
Okay, let's start down on this end.
There was a $10,000 rainy day fund that's set for the senior center, and that's new. And that doesn't seem like a lot. But I don't know what you use the rainy day fund for either. So
Yeah.
there's two questions. How did you come up with that number? And what would the money be used for, I guess?
So I'll answer the second one first. So what it would be used for is if a line item was going to be over budget rather than, having to request a transfer. Because if they zeroed out every year, then it might be more likely that they'd need a transfer from the general fund to cover an overage. So it would just be used, if a line item was a little bit over in one year, and then hopefully they would catch it back up the following year. That's kind of how it's worked at the Village Center. As far as the dollar amount, I kind of looked back to see, they've never been very short in terms of their fund balance in the time that I've been here. I think maybe 2016, 2017, they were a few $1,000s short. And a transfer was made from their fundraising fund to cover it. But I think that to me, it seemed like a reasonable amount based on the volume of the transactions and how they usually end the year.
So it's just from the past, when you're looking at it, it looked like a reasonable amount.
Yeah.
And, okay.
Yeah.
And
I talked with Cindy too.
and Cindy thought that was just fine. Okay, so it's good. Thank you.
All right, Sarah?
I have no comment.
Al?
I have comments. So you give me the floor, I'll take the opportunity, but I think at some point we need to review the policies in their entirety, because I do believe they have become a little bit,
Al, could you turn your mic on?
Oh, sorry, color.
sorry. I do believe the policies should be reviewed and updated for the current status of the village as to where we stand today. In general, there are two topics which I've spoken about before that are somewhat concerning to me, and that is the first one says budget requests should be conservative in order to reflect a cautious approach to next year's budget. I'll explain that in a little bit more detail once we get into the budget process. But that's a little bit bothersome to me that we're taking an approach and taxing our residents based on that approach. And in fact, it's having us create a fund balance because of that approach. So that is one of my areas that I'd like to address. The other would be in part 2A, talking about the undesignated fund balance between 20 and 25% of the subsequent year's operating expenditure budget. I'd also like to talk about the anticipation of the designated fund balance. So collectively, those are assets of the village, and we should recognize those and our policies as to what the expectations are. So those are the two that I see. There are a number of others that I would change a little bit here and there, but those are the two big ones that I'd like to address at some point in time.
Okay.
Any,
Um,
okay.
I mean, nothing,
Nothing that we want to dig into at this
Well,
moment?
because it sounds like it would be a deeper dive.
Okay,
So,
something that we could address at a future finance meeting?
Yes.
Okay, perfect.
Joe.
Yeah, Tom?
Thank you.
So those were things, what Al's talking about, that we did ask the village board to kind of send back to us to work on. And I'm sorry, I'm looking at Paul, but I'm thinking, do we really want more work? But that's why we asked for that. And so I guess it'd be the same thing again, if the village board would want to send us back. Last time it just kind of stopped there and wasn't referred back to us. So I think that's what Al's asking for. The village board send it back to us so we can look at some of these things and maybe make recommendations to you. We're happy to do some work for you and have you look at it after we're done, if that would be appropriate.
So let me put a bow on the package.
Thank you.
The approved 2024 budget, calculated to be a net deficit of $1,059,000. That means the budget as approved by the board, the expectation was that you'd be dipping into the reserve to the tune of $1.059 million.
can I just clarify, that includes carryovers? So if you're looking at the budget documents that I provided, that wasn't the adopted budget. That includes amendments for the carryovers that were approved. So it wasn't quite that high.
Okay, so maybe I'm not talking exact because of that, and I apologize for that. But in reality, what happened, we're anticipating to make roughly $200,000, make net surplus of $200,000. So the reality is there's $800,000 or $1.2 million that was conservatively not budgeted for, but now we're adding to the surplus of $200,000 as opposed to taking away $1 million from the surplus. And you talk about, so we taxed the residents based on the expectation we're going to use $1 million of the surplus, but in reality, after the tax, we ended up with a $200,000 net surplus. So that's the disconnect I have when we talk about conservative budgeting. And I'm not sure the correct term, but to me, coming from private enterprise, and maybe that's my fault of not understanding what all this means, it should be a realistic budget as opposed to a conservative budget. So there is some parallel and to reality, and we can understand what should the residents be taxed at. Because when I look at now what the proposed 2025 budget is, there's a proposed budget deficit of revenue minus expenses. The net deficit is $700,000. So the expectation is you're going to use $700,000 of the net undesignated reserve. That's the expectation. That's what you're taxing on. And I'm guessing because of the policy, it's been budgeted conservatively. In reality, I would suspect there's probably going to be, again, some type of net profit versus a net deficit. And to me, there's a disconnect. And if in fact the budget is correct at $700,000 negative, then going into 2026, you're in the hole. All things being equal, you're in the hole and going to make up for that 700,000 because you're not going to keep dipping, or you got to keep dipping into the reserve every year thereafter. So it's a complex formula. But you look at the macro of it, and that is, what's the expectation of the budget process, and what's the expectation of the use of the reserve, whether designated or undesignated, in the approval process. And that's my point when it comes to, when I look at the numbers I have before me at a macro level, I want to get away from my perspective, and I'm only one person of all these people here, but from my perspective, it's not conservative. It's conservative, but maybe it shouldn't be. It should be realistic as opposed to conservative. And that's the problem I'm having with this budget. Maybe it's just me, and that's fine, but that's where I'm coming from.
And to your point about the policy only addresses the unassigned fund balance and not the designated, because a lot of what we are planning to use, as we'll see when we get into the slides, is some previously designated funds, such as the sick leave, conversion bank and things like that. So maybe it would be better to include that into some policy, or how that use, split it out a little bit differently.
Yes, because I can see the use of the reserve, designated reserve, or whatever the term is. I can see where that, it really is, from the perspective of me, looking at both components of the reserve to determine whether or not it's sound or not sound. And I don't know what those answers are. And I don't know what other commission members of the board would suggest, but I do believe it needs to be included in the policy.
Okay.
All right. Thank you, Al. Robert?
I actually agree with Al. I'd like to see that we go back and look at policy. If it's dated and can stand to be reviewed. I don't think it would be unrealistic to go through and look at that. We look at everything else pretty regularly for updates. I'm gonna save, I do want to kind of push back on some of those comments you made, but I'm gonna wait till after we get the presentation for it. So I'll just stop there until we get to that point.
All right. Aaron?
Yeah, on the senior center policy, is their equipment process different than the village center? Or do we?
Right. Their
Okay.
equipment is fully budgeted in the equipment replacement fund, which is tax levy supported like the other departments. Only the village center
Has that.
has their own equipment budgeting.
Yeah, I guess it makes sense to have something similar to mirror other departments. I think my question would just be, is $10,000 enough? Like, I'd rather.
And we can always
Have more
revisit
rainy
that
day
too,
funds,
you
yeah,
know,
that-
as we try this out and see.
And no questions for me.
No questions for me either.
Same.
And Nyla?
I was thinking the same thing as Aaron, whether $10,000 is going to be enough. I would rather have funds in a reserve fund so that if they're needed, there's some place to draw from, rather than to run short and not have any way of covering it. Thank you.
All right. And I'll add my own comments. Basically, I, at a fundamental level, agree with a lot of the things that Al brought up. So with that, I guess we're looking for a motion, or are we looking to go back and do some work on the policies prior to moving forward with budget, which I think is potentially a time concern.
Sorry, Brian was asking me.
No worries.
If you're gonna make a motion on the senior center, I think you do it as a finance committee as a recommendation, and then it would go to the board. You can just do that right now if you want to, or you can wait until after the presentation's over. It's really up to you how you want to handle it. Whatever you think is gonna be easiest from just an administrative standpoint.
So
I'll make a motion then. I'd motion that we recommend that the village board approve the policy change for the senior center for a rainy day fund.
okay, we've got a motion. Do we have a second?
I'll second it.
Oh.
Wait, it has to be-
It's
finance.
Has to be
First is finance.
Okay, before we second that, this is probably way out of order, but I'm gonna ask anyway. All I heard there was the senior center policy.
Because we wanted to have other debate about the other policy. We didn't want to delay the senior center policy if we're in agreement on the senior center policy change.
I didn't think we were delaying any of these policies, but we were gonna ask the village board to refer it back to us for work.
But we would meet again as a body after we would have to close tonight, then the village board would have to pass it, and we would have to
Yep.
refer it back to here to pass it. If we know, however, that we're okay with the senior center policy to separate that out from everything else, that's what the motion is about.
You're misunderstanding what my thought was. My thought was that we recommend all of these policies to the board. And the board approved the policies because they've been working, but the board also refer them back to us to do more work to refine them so that in the future they get fixed.
I understand that, but then, so we shouldn't be having debate on an open motion.
That's okay.
If that's okay with the finance committee, then it means that any changes that would made would impact 2026, not 2025, if that was the intent, so.
I mean, I don't know that there's a lot of time to get it all the way through the process before November 21st.
That's why I was trying to be realistic and say that if we did not approve tonight. But if you're saying that you want to push them all through, I mean, then nobody second my motion and let it die, and then you can make the other motion.
Okay, in light of that, looking for a second. Going once, going twice, and the motion fails.
There you go.
All right,
I'm gonna move that we approve those budget policies as they were presented, but request that the village board refer them back to the finance committee to work on in the next year for next year's budget.
The two separate motions.
Well, I made it as one.
I understand.
all right.
If you want it to be split, we could do that.
I think that's what Robert was trying to do, actually. so- But nobody seconded it, so.
No, Robert was trying to address one component within.
Senior center one.
But that was the only policy that was changing, so that's why I was.
So anyway, that's my motion. It's out there.
Okay, so we've got a motion by Tom. We'll look for a second.
I'll second.
And we've got a second from Al. Okay, any further discussion? Seeing none. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? And that motion carries. Do we need to right away?
All right.
Okay,
I will make that motion.
I'll second.
Make the motion to approve the budget financial policies with the one change as presented.
And then I'll
And
second.
refer it back to the finance committee. I'm sorry.
Second that one.
All right. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all in favor? Oh, I'm
Aye.
sorry.
What?
All right.
I was just gonna ask if everyone was okay with the $10,000 or if we thought that we should look at that number or ask.
This year might
You're
be a
not
good
a
year for it to be a test on the amount.
That's true, yeah.
I trust the senior center.
Yep.
Your number already.
Right. All right, good discussion.
Mhm.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries. Back to you, Joe.
All right, thank you. On to item number 3, discuss and take action to place on file proposed 2025 operating and capital improvement budget. And back to you, Renee.
Yes, I'm gonna share my screen. But all of you should have the slides in front of you. Okay. All right. So first, some of you may notice that the slides are brighter and more interesting this year, and that is not due to me. I am not a bright and interesting doer. But Kaylin, who hope might be watching or will probably watch the meeting. Kaylin, our communications manager, did spruce them up for us this year, so I wanted to give a thanks to her. So we don't have to look at the same boring slides again. And I also wanted to introduce our deputy finance director, who is in attendance for her first village board meeting, Julie Botham, sitting there in the back. So she helped a lot with working through all the budgets from the departments and preparing a lot of the documents for this presentation. So thanks to her. We've got a lot of department heads and fire and EMS here, so they're going to help contribute to this presentation as well. We're happy to answer questions throughout. We'll also have time at the end for questions. But we're primarily going to focus on the slides, but we're happy to answer questions on the detail budget or any things that might be on anybody's mind. So I think all of you have been through this process now at least once, but this is just a summary of that process. The department started working on their department level budgets back in June. And then we compiled those, and Todd and I met. And we also had a meeting with Kristen to kind of go through and refine some of the items. Just prior to this, budget bullet point 3, we reviewed the budget policies. Now we're going through the presentation, the initial presentation. And then coming up, November 4th is our additional public hearing where we invite the public to give feedback early enough so that we can hopefully make changes in the draft if they're necessary. And then the required public hearing is on November 18th, at which, the public can still make comments. We can still make adjustments. It's just a little trickier at that late stage because the board would consider that for final budget approval that night. What is unknown at this point? And primarily that's just the levies for the other jurisdictions, the school district, MATC, and the county. Those should be coming in toward the end of October or early to mid-November. We can't say what the total tax rate is. We can only speak to the village tax rate tonight. In some years, I've had another unknown, which is the manufacturing assessment, but that did come through on Friday. And it was very, very close to my estimate, just a little bit higher. And it didn't actually even change really any of the numbers in here. So, but we do know that. So I guess that's good that it didn't go down. Some years that has gone down or been below my estimate, that can be problematic, but we're in good shape. Now Todd's going to take the next one.
So Professor Todd has arrived. I'm going to do a little education today that we really haven't taken time to do before. And I'm not saying it's for your benefit. It's definitely for the benefit of an everyday citizen, because the concepts of assessed values and equalized values can be very confusing. And as Renee continues the presentation, there's going to be references to both assessed value and assessed tax rate and equalized value and equalized tax rate. So I even find myself tongue-tied when spending time to try to explain this. So I did my best to kind of bulk up on the information, and I'd like to give you, everybody and the community, a little bit of a perspective on what those are and what they mean. So there's essentially 3 sort of different categories of values that you might hear talked about today. The assessed value on one side, the equalized value on the other, and somewhere in the between is sort of the truth, with the truth being what somebody can actually sell their house for. That's what I would call the fair market value. The assessed value and the equalized value aren't necessarily the fair market value, although they could be, it's possible. So what's the assessed value? The purpose of the assessed value is to maintain equity between all of the taxpayers in the village of Waunakee specifically. So this relates to a fair distribution of responsibility based on property value to pay for the village services. The total amount of the levy that you guys authorize as part of our process. Now, the last time we had our revaluation, an assessing firm come through and do a full reval on all the values in Waunakee was 2023. Our budget does include the implication of a contract that was approved about a year ago with our assessing company for a 5-year cycle of maintained assessed values. And we will be having a market-based adjustment on all properties in the village in 2025, and we'll have one again in 2027 as part of that 5-year contract. So when we're talking about assessed values, that is, again, important for our own tax base and its distribution for our costs, okay? And our assessor does the best at the time of revaluation to hit that target on the nose at 100%. I don't think we actually hit 100% after the last reval. It was in the middle 90s perhaps, and we're actually currently at 88. So stay tuned on that, more to tell. So let's talk a bit about equalized value and what that is. Again, our local assessor is interested in equity between property owners in our municipality. The Department of Revenue, which oversees equalized value, is interested in equity between municipalities and counties across our state. So there's two main reasons for this, and that relates to seeking an apples to apples comparison and consistent standards in two circumstances. One is to apportion tax levies for jurisdictions where there's multiple cities or villages or towns that have an interest in that jurisdiction and pay taxes to it. For example, the school district. The village of Waunakee isn't the only tax-paying entity into the school district. Same with a technical college, same with Dane County. Now, how do we get a fair representation of property obligations to pay for all of those jurisdictions when we all of our communities are different are on different assessment schedules and not the same approach? So while we might be at 88% property valuation, town X might be at 68 and another community might be at 102%. So there's a scattering of those circumstances across all the communities involved. So what the state does through probably some really large algorithm, determine on an annual basis an assessment ratio. And they apply that assessment ratio to all of our total value to establish an equalized value that allows for comparison, as imperfect as it is, between all of the communities involved in a jurisdictional, let's say the school district. And then they use those equalized values to spread out the levy pie for the school district or the county or whatever that jurisdiction might be. There's another reason that the state requires equalized value, and that's to distribute shared revenues across all of Wisconsin's 1,850 municipalities. Shared revenue is essentially an approach to take, well, historically, a portion of state sales tax and take away the ability of us to tax locally, but instead distribute that across communities in Wisconsin. Again, we all are on different levels of assessment and assessment schedules, so they use the equalized ratio to balance the game for all of the communities as we all seek shared revenue. So in the 1980s, the state actually passed law to do essentially it's truth in taxation. And they asked all communities to put on the tax bill the equalized values. So that's represented to the community. Keep in mind though, if you can go to the next slide, that the equalized value has nothing to do with the number at the bottom of your tax bill, the amount you have to pay. It has, the equalized value has more to do with you understanding how that that assessment ratio applies to your property and maybe gives you a little bit better picture of your actual property's worth. So Al, this isn't gonna help you because I colored the bubbles, my friend. But we show the assessed value. It's in yellow. It's top line, first bubble, top left bubble. See it, Al? All right. That is the assessed value on this particular property. This is a 2023 tax bill. So we're going back a year. That is the number that as you do the math down the right side of the page, and that's the number based that the tax bill amount is based off of. But for because of the state's requirement to demonstrate the equalized values, we still include that information one line down for the property owner. So that can get confusing. I want to clarify some of the history between why that happens and how it happens. I think the end of it really, you'll see references to our assessment and our equalized values. And at the very end of our budget presentation, you'll see a discussion about how we can best compare ourselves to other cities and villages in Dane County. And there we will very specifically talking about equalized values to balance our evaluation against other communities. So we need to compare those equalized rates. I will add one caution, and that's that communities have taken different approach to using fees or special charges, or more popular as of late, wheel tax to generate revenues. We've generally kind of been on the sidelines as a community for use of special taxes or things like wheel tax, which isn't a tax. Well, that's been argued a little bit. But that does make apples and apples a little bit tricky because we don't account for the unique use of special fees and schedules like that. So a little bit of perspective and instruction on assessed and equalized. I may have not perfectly communicated all that. Renee, do you have other perspective or other questions about that differentiation? Okay, back to Renee.
Thanks, Todd. All right, so back to the numbers. Here are some of the key budgetary outcomes of the current proposed budget. Keeping in mind that this is just the village's share of the taxes. The proposed tax rate, the assessed tax rate is increasing. Again, that is what the tax bill is based on, people's assessed values. So it's proposed to increase that 3.63% to $5 or 5.22 per thousand of value. You look at the 5-year and the 10-year average, we're below those, but just to mention that revaluations took place both in the 5-year timeframe and the 10-year timeframe. So as a full valuation occurs, the assessed rate typically goes down, and we saw that in the 2023 tax bills. On the other side, the equalized tax rate is decreasing. We'll talk a little bit about where our equalized values are at, but they increase substantially, so that actually brings the equalized tax rate down, again, below both the 5 and 10-year average. One thing I wanted to mention on that equalized tax rate of 4.614, because we have dropped below 5 mils, we no longer qualify for the expenditure restraint program. So to qualify for that, you have to keep your budget within a certain level of increase, but you also have to be 5 mils or higher. And so we get one more year in 2025, we get about 50,000. And then after that, until we go back up to 5 mils, which will probably take a little bit to get that equalized tax rate up, we won't qualify for expenditure restraint anymore. So it's just how the legislation is written at this point. So what does that mean for the tax bills? I always put $100,000 assessed value on here because it's easy to do the math for your own home or property or anything that you own. So we're looking at an $18 increase per 100,000 of value. Down to the third line, that is the average village home value. So for 2024, that value has risen to $481,490, up from $478,141 in the prior year. So, and it looks kind of strange between lines 3 and 4 because it's showing a $500,000 home is increasing by a smaller amount. But that's because since the average home value increased, you have to take into consideration the taxes for the increase in the value in addition to the tax rate changes. So it looks a little strange, but the math does work. Now getting into the general fund a little bit. So we're showing an increase of about 9.7% over the prior year. That's made up of ongoing costs and some one-time costs. So if we took out the one-time costs, which we'll talk a little bit more about later, we'd be showing about a 7% increase, which is much closer to our 5-year average. The ongoing costs include things like the step increases and the COLA for our wages, health insurance, fire and EMS increases, some new positions that are being added, other things like IT increases. Those are considered ongoing because we will have to budget for them in the future. The one-time cost of about $322,000, plus some other carryovers that we had, we're going to use an offset by using about $700,000 of fund balance, so that increase in expenditures isn't fully pushed out to the levy. So what are some of the more significant items amongst all of our funds? We do have representatives from fire and EMS here tonight. They're going to talk in more detail about their budgets, but fire, we're seeing an increase of about $67,000 for the village share, a 9% increase. And EMS, we're seeing about $107,000 increase, or a 15%. Again, we are a large share of both of those, 71% of the fire district budget and 67% of the EMS budget. So we have some fairly big numbers coming into our budget. New positions, 150,000 or so. Some of that is now having a full year of some of our 2024 hires. That's 64,000 of that number. And then we have some positions that are totally new in the 2025 budget of about 87,000. And then debt service, we are showing an overall increase in our debt service of 108,000 for new debt. And that's primarily due to the borrowing we did earlier this year, which includes the police department remodel, which was a bigger chunk than we have in some years. Just for some information, Todd talked a little bit about the shared revenue. And then in 2024 is the first year we received the supplemental shared revenue. So looking out to what our 2025 increases are going to be, we're gaining about $3,000 in the traditional shared revenue and about $8,500 in the supplemental shared revenue. Still pretty small amounts, but considering we got no increases before, or, even went down a little bit in some years, at least it's in a step in the right direction, but it doesn't go too far in our budget. Some other significant items that the village board has already talked about. We a couple months ago approved a 1-year extension for our IT managed services and some IT security things that adds about 80,000 to the budget. I think it might have been just at the last meeting or 2 meetings ago where we talked about the code enforcement contracting out for those services. That was adding 50,000 to the budget. And the sustainability plan for the ad hoc sustainability committee is about close to 29,000, a one-time cost. So we are going to use fund balance to help pay for that. All right, we're almost to the part where other people get to talk. So personnel expenses, as always, that it's really a huge part of our budget. 59% of the general fund budget, 31% of all budgets combined. And so, it kind of drives some of those expense increases that we see. But we're proposing a cost of living adjustment of 3% on 1/1 of 2025. That equates to about 230,000 for all staff together, including the police department union employees. Their contract is settled through the end of next year, and it also included a 3% COLA. Just some other informational things, 0.5 up or down in the wages impacts the budget about 38,000. And the 5-year history, we've averaged right around 2.5% to 3% over the past several years. And health insurance was another thing we had talked about at a previous meeting. That adds about 70,000, keeping the insurance the way we have it this year. We're currently wrapping up open enrollment, so there could be some adjustments if people change their plan, and I will work that into the next iteration of the budget for following meetings. Additional staffing requests. So the departments will speak a little bit more to the why they're asking for these staff, but I'll just summarize what the ask is. One is a part-time citizen service representative in the clerk's department. They had hired an LTE in 2024 using some of their election carryover funds. And they want to make that more permanent into a 0.8 FTE, which would impact the budget about 67,000 for 2025. Also the addition of a couple interns in the admin department and a recreation intern, adding 9,000 and 10,000 for those positions. And then again, the impact of the full year of 2024 hires, because they were hired early to mid-year, they have some impact on next year's budget. And now we get some departments going.
So you'll hear from all the departments to discuss their specific details, and I think we'll be happy to take questions as we go related to our own departments. Each department is only hitting the highlights. You've got in your packet the broad detail of all different expenses. Our goal is to try to direct your attention to those things that are most consequential. Again, we're happy to answer questions on any items that you might want to dive into deeper for us. If I had to label this year's budget, I know in the past years I've referenced, okay, we've hit a growth budget. I think last year was a budget of opportunity because we had shared revenues come in, that was going to be a new sustained level, and we were able to add some integral positions to the organization. This budget I've labeled an innovation and collaboration budget. We're seeing new approaches to use of technologies and softwares in our departments. You'll hear that in several of the presentations, as well as looking to collaboration with other entities to bring service delivery, as opposed to hiring additional staff. So to kick off that collaboration element, the administrator's budget includes two of those referenced collaborations. And I know you have relatively recent information with some specific details about these two proposals. What I like for the board to consider tonight is this as an introduction to these, with the opportunity at our next meeting to dive in more deeply if you'd like to. But I think in both cases, we're presented with a unique opportunity to add service enhancements to our community. The first one is a collaboration with the Waunakee Neighborhood Connection. And Veronica Castillo is here, who's the relatively new executive director at WNC. And background materials have been submitted to you, but the Cliff Notes version is a part-time bilingual specialist, and I think possibly even caseworker sort of position, was recruited for in the past handful of months by WNC. Being a part-time position and a modest wage range really led to several failed efforts to recruit for that in its part-time role. At that time, WNC approached the village about partnering for that position to be transformed into a full-time position for WNC, with the thought that the village would enter into agreement with them to purchase 40%, 2 days a week, essentially, of support for translation and interpretive services that would be of support to all Waunakee departments. We collaborated with WNC on a job description, and included with information that was sent to you was the value proposition from the village's perspective and additional context related to the position from WNC's perspective. The total impact, 40% share, including the likely benefits that would be offered for this position at WNC, is about a $25,000 impact. Both the Neighborhood Connection and the village, whenever we enter something new, you have to keep a little bit of perspective that our experience in our first year is going to inform us on how this works and what any future year might hold. We may realize that the village just blows the roof off of the use for this particular person, and we need to approach it slightly differently. But we'll have a lot to find out this first year. You can imagine virtually every printed communication that comes from a majority, if not all of our departments, would be translated into Spanish to service our residents and definitely our growing population of English-only speakers, along with some of our social media content and then participation in special events. So based on the evaluation we've done thus far, we believe as a village that we'll be we'll have someone very busy for 2 days a week. This isn't going to take away from some things that other departments have to do on a routine basis to communicate with folks that might not allow us access. Police incidents, our department uses a system, what's it called, Chief? Language line, to very quickly allow an officer on site at a moment's notice to get support for interpretation on scene. That doesn't go away. But this is an approach where we can possibly even schedule some special meetings as needed during the days that we have this employee working on the village's matters. So as I said, Veronica is here. Happy to pause at this point and see if you have questions about this proposed collaboration. And again, I appreciate the fact that you've had limited time to dive deep into the materials that have been supplied.
Anyone?
Yeah. Todd, fire and EMS is here. Would they have use for this person, or is there their own system like the chief said that he had for police?
We haven't approached fire or EMS about collaboration on the position. If there's an opportunity for them to participate, I'd be willing to talk about it along with, financial entry into that as well.
Okay.
But that's something I'd be willing to entertain.
I just wondered if there's already a system in place that helps you out with, if there's a language barrier when you get to a scene.
We use the same language.
That's what I was thinking. Yeah.
We utilize one.
That helps me a lot, just to know that they're already covered in a way.
I'm a little bit familiar with language line at work, and I think it's a great tool, like most languages. Does the village use anything similar for, I'm just thinking like other languages that people call in, or?
Yeah, we have, sometimes we'll use our Google Translate. We also
Okay.
have a device that we've used.
We don't have, okay, like a formal.
Yeah, none of
okay.
them are definitely none of them are perfect. To give you perspective, if you recall, we did translate one-page resolution. You remember the Hispanic month, Hispanic Heritage Month designation? If I recall, that bill was about $150 for the single page translation into Spanish.
I was just curious if like, what range of other, if people have questions for village staff. But I was excited to see this, and I think it's a great way to, we want the people living here to be able to be engaged in the community and have full access to the basic services we provide. And I think it's just like such a no-brainer for me that we should be doing what we can to make those more approachable. And so I think it's a good idea to ease into that if we haven't really been doing anything that, this isn't someone full-time working for the village, but what a great partnership to be able to connect a huge population of our village.
I know in talking with Cindy Moseman from the Senior Center, there have been challenges as there's also aging members of our community who are Spanish only speakers. Imagine a family relocating and there's a grandmother or grandfather or both. And I think we've had a couple interactions that just haven't produced engagement with the
Yeah.
Senior Center when they would have liked, as would have we, along with providing case management service. So we see this person being able to stand alongside our hired and trained case managers to provide real-time interpretation with those case management engagements.
Sorry, can I finish my? I think this is an awesome start, and I just almost would be curious if we should add on like a village having their own, or like language line or something so that this person is not suddenly, okay, you have to be there 24/7 for all these different things. So I don't know, just a good tool, I think maybe staff.
Any questions for Veronica while she's here? And maybe I might.
I have a few questions, actually, and probably will go to a bit to both. I do see it's for translation and interpretation services, and generally in other worlds that those are two very different services that are on there. So is there any, generally, I mean, some people are translators, some people are interpreters. They're not always both. And I was looking at the requirements on the back, it just says fluency. Are we going to require that they go through some sort of like program that they can, that's, independent, as opposed to somebody saying, yeah, of course I can do that?
Thank you for that question. I'm Veronica Castillo, the Executive Director at Waunakee Neighborhood Connection. We did discuss that. We did talk about hiring someone with a certification. What I want to alleviate is a barrier of cost, because there's a cost associated to get certified in everything. Angie Rojas, she was our former board chair and you probably all know her. She is doing all our testing. She is certified and licensed. And so she is doing our testing for interpretations and translations. But we are asking them to be pretty well leveled in their Spanish to be able to do both. So they have to come with both to be able to take this position.
Okay.
Mhm.
My concern always be is that for, at a government level, just if there's any sort of confusion or, you know, well-meaning but accidentally misinterpreted or, you know, mistranslated item, it could become a liability for the village for not providing services to somebody that, you know, based off of the fact that they couldn't speak English. So I do get concerned about that. The other question I have, and this is, I guess, simultaneously for both. So this is through WNC. So even though the village would be getting, you said 40% access, so they're not, this position would not be eligible for benefits from the village. It's all the benefits will be handled by WNC.
Correct. WNC's employee.
Okay.
So yes, we would handle all those benefits.
So we almost have like a contractual relationship with WNC.
Correct.
that
It would be a
okay.
contractual agreement.
Okay. That actually makes it a lot easier for me to follow through with what you're doing here. So thank you. Those are my only questions. By the way, very supportive of getting the Spanish services, the library. I've always asked Eric about them doing that and having more there. So that in the senior center, I mean, those are great things. So very supportive on that front as well.
All right. Al?
Yeah, I do have a question. And unfortunately, Ryan's out. Because it really deals more with the legalities of what happens if this person is on a Waunakee day and for whatever reason slips and falls, or for whatever reason kicks something over and the house starts on fire, liability of product or the house, and as well as herself or himself. You know, who's going to carry that type of insurance when that person is on a Waunakee day? Because what I'm reading on is, it's hard for me to understand some of this that's here, but what I read is contract, so it's not a donation. There's a contractual obligation that we're gonna, is it hours accountable? Is that how it's gonna be contracted out? Or is it just simply we're gonna take 2/7 of her wages and administration and that's what we're gonna charge back to Waunakee, or 2/5?
Yeah, as far as logistics, we're gonna learn a lot, but the anticipated plan is this person will work out of a dedicated office at WNC. And will perform the tasks as best they can on site at their office at WNC on Tuesdays and Thursdays with dedication to Waunakee, but will be mobile as needed to be on site at village departments. So this person will make site visits as necessary and probably frequently. We've also agreed that there may be a day on Tuesday when WNC is in a pinch and something is unusual and their time is really needed for WNC. Same thing may be the case Monday, Wednesday, or Friday for when they're on a WNC day for a critical need for a village purpose. What we're essentially agreeing to do is to track carefully the time spent by this person as a tool to evaluate what 2026 may mean to us. As far as Brian, you're welcome to come back. No, you can't wait. The question was, as this person is a WNC employee, while performing any work related to Village of Waunakee functions, what liabilities exist or coverages would need to be afforded to protect the village and others?
And is that something to worry about? Is that covered by general insurance? You know, if this person's on an EMS call and misspeaks or does something and I don't know, they
I
kill
think
the
we
person.
would need to, we'd want to make sure there's coverage. We need to talk to our insurance company to see exactly how is handled. So yeah, I definitely think the village want to consult with its insurer.
Yeah, so it's not as clear cut as we think, because we do have that potential.
If approved by the board in its eventual budget mid-November, the village will then begin to work the contract language that we would have together with WNC, and that would likely stipulate insurance expectations.
And I too am in favor of this. I think it's a great person as you're gonna hire.
All right. Anyone else?
Yeah, I'll also speak just in favor of it. I do think it's been a long time coming, and I'm glad that we're going to be able to serve this segment of our residents and our population better than we have been able to. So, and thank you, WNC, for the collaboration on this. The more we can knit together our organizations and support, the better.
Yes,
Thank you.
thank you. Appreciate it.
Yep. And I would say, oh, sorry, Joe.
Oh.
I was gonna say it's continued advancement of our collaboration because the relationship already at the former library building is working out real well, and we're glad that it is proceeding as it is.
So being the techie guy that I am, I have to throw out the AI card. And is there a reason, particularly from the translation standpoint, that we wouldn't want to maybe use AI to do an initial review and then perhaps have this person be able to go through and correct it or whatever for that matter, just to, I guess, maybe improve efficiency? And maybe that's a learning thing.
I'm
as
not,
we
I'm
go.
not gonna pretend to know that world quite as well. I'm gonna.
So we currently do translations and we do send some out if it's larger. I am certified and trained to do translation interpretation. So with our bandwidth, I never recommend to use Google. I never recommend to use AI because they're not understanding the intricacies of language.
Absolutely.
And so we do have an amazing internship program with Waunakee High School right now. So some of our interns are fluent in Spanish. So I'm having them do our basic translation and then I will review. But that was our first question. Can we use Google? And I said, yes, to give you the basis, but you cannot send it out using
Sure.
Google. So we need that human eye on it.
Excellent.
Which may be the same tool that somebody in this role will use to be most efficient in their
Mhm.
functions.
But they still need to have that actual
Yeah.
final review of it and everything.
Mhm.
Especially when you think of the type, I mean, imagine the recreation program guide.
Oh, yeah.
Or the senior center program guide and the complexity and of the arrangement, the dollars, and
Yep.
the time and so on. These are complex communications.
Absolutely.
Mhm. And
Now-
even now that we don't have a bilingual person, we have genie.com, which is also our language lines, because we do also have members who are speaking Turkish and Arabic.
Sure. No, I really appreciate that. I like this whole concept, and I love the fact that you brought up interns from the high school, because that was actually a note that I had made here as well. So it's
Mhm.
great to hear you're already doing that.
Yeah, they're doing a great job. They're doing a great
Wonderful.
job. I mean, our organization is run by volunteers and now that we have interns, and I have spoken to Dr. Brown and maybe about adjusting the internship program, because the internship program, they have to be in good standing, but I'm also curious about those non-traditional students
Sure.
and how we can get them involved too.
Excellent.
Mhm.
Great stuff. Any additional thoughts? Nope.
All right, continuing, thank you. The next collaboration is with Create Waunakee, Inc., the new nonprofit sister organization to the Village's Create Waunakee Committee. And this is actually realizing aspects of our planned journey as we had kind of mapped out in our strategic plan related to the Village's creative economy efforts. So with us tonight online is Natasha Lutz, the president of Create Waunakee, Inc. So she's there to help with questions. And also Edgar Steenwinkle is here. Edgar is a member of the board for Create Waunakee, Inc. And both have been involved in assembling this proposal, which someone mentioned the difference between a donation, maybe Robert, it was you, a donation versus a contractual relationship. This one is the donation component to supporting the addition of a full-time staff member as development director for Create Waunakee, Inc. The budget proposal is $30,000 contribution, $25,000 of which is proposed in the levy, with $5,000 coming from proceeds that Create Waunakee has generated and are still in village coffers. Now, Create Waunakee, Inc. has also been very, very successful in their generation of funds and will be the key invested party in creation of a director position. I believe the organization has approximately $80,000 now in its budget. And this position, again, is the culmination of years of of planning and strategic design for enhancement of the creative, everything creative in Waunakee. And we've seen this organization do great things to the point where we're doing so many great things that the reliance on the volunteer efforts for both the Create Waunakee Committee and the Create Waunakee Inc. Board are becoming a challenge to keep doing the good things that we're doing and to continue and advance them. When I talk about doing things like this as opposed to adding staff, what this partnership will do will actually ease the impact on staff. Some of you know, you all know Kylie West, who, by the way, is doing very well in her recovery from neck surgery. But the time and energy that she spends on a number of the Create Waunakee projects, just simply in terms of coordination and logistics engagement, is can be pretty intense. So what we're essentially doing this is returning to Kylie her ability to serve in the executive assistant functions more effectively within administration at Village Hall. So what's proposed here is a year one approach to bringing in a director with the thought, and I'll say probably a reasonable expectation that this may be the first of a few years of requested participation as Create Waunakee Inc. phases out public funding to a wholly supported standalone development director position for Create Waunakee Inc., no longer reliant on municipal participation, likely through membership-based transition for Create Waunakee, and grant pursuits and essentially more program development because of the addition of a development director giving us more bandwidth to do those things. So with that, I'm gonna, again, understanding that the materials are relatively new to you, this is your introduction. We can dive deeper and at your November meetings, again, with the Create Waunakee Inc. Board members to help provide their context. So I'm gonna pause there. I know Erin's a member of the Create Waunakee Committee. She may have perspective on this too, as well as Edgar and Natasha here to answer questions from Create Waunakee Inc.'s perspective.
Erin, shall we start at the other end with Nyla?
I don't have any questions.
Anyone else along the way?
No, I think, I guess maybe one of my only questions would be just the ongoing sustainability. Is the plan then to continue increasing the revenues to the point where there's more events as the group grows, and then potentially there would be even replacing Kylie's role at some point with that? I don't know if the team has talked about that at all or like future planning.
Well, it is intended to be. Can you get up to the mic?
There's a button on there. Make sure the light turns. There's a button.
Hi, this is Edgar Steenwinkel. Yeah, it is ultimately the intent for this job to create more funding so that it essentially pays for itself. That makes sense. And I don't think we've actually discussed whether it replaces fully the impact from the Waunakee group itself. But that's something we can certainly look at.
We did envision a day where the Create Waunakee Committee itself would dissolve to become essentially a working group of volunteers under Create Waunakee Inc. So the thought is to remove that level of administration and effort, although there's no time set on that. And I think we definitely want to do it when the time is right and when when our organizations are prepared for that transition too.
Okay, so that was really my question, is if we were putting a time frame on this or not. But at this point, there's the intention there, but this is where we're at right now for the foreseeable future.
Correct.
Thank you.
No questions.
I'm generally supportive of this. I'm excited to see this organization grow. My only question would be looking at the job description, and again, that's maybe not the scope of the finance committee here, but to hire somebody or to look for somebody that's got grants management experience, somebody that's experienced in grants and foundation work so that you can maximize the opportunity for bringing income in. But that would be my only feedback. I think it's great.
As an addition to the requirements.
Yeah, that, because there is a lot of great money out there, and a degree of experience in grants writing would be very helpful.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a great addition.
Excited to see this happen, though.
I do think Natasha is, I think she maybe wanted to jump in on a couple of the questions that you asked. So she's remote. Natasha, I've given you the ability to come off mute and share directly to some of the questions you've heard so far, and there's probably going to be more.
Okay, thank you. So as to the question of how soon would we separate from the village, we've sort of been operating as once we hire, that's sort of our last step in that. However, there will be a training curve for anyone that we do hire. And so if we have some ongoing programming and are trying to onboard somebody, we may still need some additional admin help to be able to pull off a program prior to that person being up and running. And then as far as, I also wanted to let you know that we do have 2 anonymous donors that are willing to each give 15,000. So that would be matched to what we are requesting from the village this year, on top of what we have raised with our fundraising. And when looking at this and talking to Mike George, who is the nonprofit mentor we've been working with, he said that really what we are doing already is a full-time position as far as a development director. And so that first year, we're kind of looking at maintaining the level as they are learning how to do things, because we simply don't have volunteer support to maintain. When it comes to the gala, we cannot put one on this year because we do not have volunteers able to put in that kind of time again. So I hope that answered questions. If you have more, please let me know.
Nothing more for me.
Absolutely. Robert?
Yeah, I have a few questions. So I talked about the creative economy since before I was on the board, so I'm glad to see that we're making another step towards getting independence on that and getting it out from under the board. So my question is, we currently have a budget online for $35,000 as an estimated budget. Where would this go in the actual budget? I'm in the GL for Create Waunakee.
Same question I actually just whispered to Renee.
Sorry, that is a long document. I think that it is on the other line already. In this number, in this preliminary budget, I misunderstood Todd, so I only had 25,000 in the budget. Because I didn't know about using some of the Create Waunakee funds that we have on hand. So I think in the 32,000 number in Create Waunakee other, that is where the 25,000 is. And I'm gonna have to add 5, but it's using assigned fund balance that we already have. So it's not gonna impact the bottom line budget. Is that what you mean?
A bit. And now I'm a little bit confused because we had budgeted 28,600.
That's the carryover. So
Okay.
that's some of the money. There's several pots of money for the creative economy. Some of the money raised on the auction. And then there's funds for scholarships that we're still holding some of the money for. And then the money that Todd was proposing to use. So that is the amended 2024 budget that includes the carryovers.
Okay.
So the original budget was probably closer to the 10,000 that I have in the estimated column.
Right.
And then adding on some of those carryovers.
Okay.
It's sort of, that demonstrates the unique animal that Create Waunakee has become, which is starting to almost lend itself based on how we're raising funds and using it for unique purposes to better distribution through nonprofit standalone organizations. So I think that the confusion makes sense because of how unique Create Waunakee has become.
I kind of look at the same way that we have for the line item for Wanna Boom. I know we have that conversation, it seems annually, where people ask about that, and I feel like that's probably the same type of funding issue where it's like it's segregated funds, but it looks like it's something. So I'm following now. Thank you for clarifying on that. Because this is more of a donation, I'm worried, I'm just going to express worry that when we're doing a one-time payment on creating a permanent position, that we're setting an expectation that future budgets will have to have the payment out. I was kind of curious, what would the appetite be for the village to say, we're going to donate 30,000 to Create Waunakee Inc., but not explicitly for the purpose of hiring a employee. It's just for them to use as they see fit. If they see fit to hire this person to do it, would that be easier? For future, budget purposes, that way they would have their own capacity to decide, what they want to do with the money. If it's to hire that person, then it's to hire the person. Secondary question to that, that I just caught up in Natasha's comments there. They're not going to have a gala in 2025. Could you maybe address, since that was a pretty significant fundraising item for you, what are you guys going to do to make up for that? Or are we saying it's this 30,000 and the 30,000 from the pledges?
So Create Waunakee Inc. already has some significant funds, and we would use that for the transition to a year in which we do have the gala. If that makes sense. So we're kind of.
So you would go lean this next year, and then you would hope to have the gala again in 2026 to make up for not having one in 25.
I think that's one of the things we would be looking at. Yes.
Okay.
Or other new unrealized programs or grant approaches. Natasha has her hand up to try to. answer your
Yeah,
question
please.
as well. Go ahead, Natasha.
Okay. So I think that our hope is that it would take about, a year for that person to be able to figure out all of our programming. But we are looking at a grant that we could put in a letter of intent for in January. And that would be able to, if we were to qualify for that, that would be a significant amount of finances for the 2025 year. And then if we would start planning with a longer run-up, a future gala, that would likely be early in 2026.
Okay.
If that helps. And there's also another grant that we're also looking at, but again, none of us has the capacity to be able to work on grants at this point. So trying to get somebody on board that can do both would be great. And then as Todd mentioned, we are also looking at developing a membership program, which would also generate revenue. And we've also talked about having an online auction, which we currently have software for. We did not until recently. And so that hasn't happened this year, but.
Okay. I just will probably have some concerns about sustainability of the financing of this as it's currently presented today. I know it's a little bit of a chicken or the egg situation, since they're saying that they need to hire somebody so that they can get the grant writing and get the programs, but it just seems like there's going to be at the cost that's proposed of $70,000 to $80,000. I mean, that's the entirety of their current balance. So even with the one-time grants, it just doesn't seem sustainable. So I think if it would help, as we discuss this in the future, just maybe to have a bit more openness about what longer term, not just 1 year, but like a 3-year pro forma would look like for this.
I can add just a bit of context. The actually Create Waunakee Inc. board, in their very early draft of the proposal, had a 2-year request to you to consider. You're only able to approve a 1-year budget unless there's firm terms to a contractual arrangement. And I thought the complexity of arriving at that solution was trickier than Create Waunakee Inc. pursuing a 1-year contribution to get things kicked off. So they were thinking sustainability as well. In fact, their nonprofit consultant suggested that attracting a candidate for a position like this is gonna be a lot easier if they knew there were a couple years of funding sustainability to support the position itself. So unless we do want to start to talk about, more contractual obligations for multi-years, this is what we're presented with. But if you want us to come back with a different approach, I'm happy to try.
I just really struggle with just the 1 year funding because it's something completely could change next year and then suddenly, I'm worried then the village board is going to end up footing the bill if there's not another donation or say there's just a down year for donations. And we want this to succeed. I mean, this is really the village created this and the village wants it to go forth and be successful. So we would end up being on the hook for it. I would feel like in the end. Now, I know you could say we don't have to vote for it, but I mean, why would we? We've invested so much. We would want to keep it going. So it just doesn't seem, again, it's the long-term sustainability. So maybe having a multi-year approach would make it easier to understand. It just seems almost unfair to say we're going to give 30,000 and then next year come back and beg for, whatever difference you need still.
I'll just pop in right here just because my thoughts were along the sustainability as well. I really appreciate the concept on the 2-year piece. I'm curious, I don't think there's any reason that we couldn't pursue that separately outside of the budget. So would it be feasible, I guess, for us to potentially approve the 30 this year and then pursue that contract as well to, give that sustainability comfort?
I don't see why that's not a possibility.
Okay.
I would also like to say that Mike George suggested that it's not unusual for somebody in a director position to understand that part of their role is to raise the funds to continue their own income to make that sustainable. And that they would accept that position, understanding that. So our goal was to try to get as close to a 2 years amount as possible prior to hiring, so that we know that we have 2 years, one for them to get their feet underneath, and the next year to be raising the additional funds.
I think maybe, yeah, and Natasha, to Mike's point, I think you basically was saying that this is the profession that they enter into and understand those elements of what they've chosen to do professionally.
Correct. And our gala did raise near $70,000. So not saying that it would again, but there is definitely community support showing that this is something that is worthwhile. And we did include it in our report, but the concept of, money spent on the arts comes back, I think it's 2.65% or 2.75% into the community on spending.
Which is why we do view this with the lens of economic development in mind.
Excellent. All right. Al?
To answer or to further, I guess, embellish Robert's discussion, and there are easy ways to satisfy Robert and the rest of the board as to the accountability of the donation, and that is to put together a budget and it wouldn't take much, I would suspect, to put together a budget of anticipation, not necessarily committing to the second and third year, but a budget of expectation or whatever you want to call it. So there's accountability back to the board as to why it's needed and when is the weaning off process on on an anticipated process. But I do believe and I do support this contribution, and I do believe there should be accountability as to coming once a year before the board, or maybe the finance committee, whichever, to address why they need the ongoing funds. There's no downside to that. Once a year coming back before the board, this is what we did, this is where we stand financially, and this is what we're asking for. I think that's a reasonable ask. So from an accountability standpoint. So after this year, I think that that would appease perhaps some of the board members at the table here. The other is, accountability as to what else this person's doing, how they're creating excitement and creating the arts. And I have to tell you that I am a supporter of the arts. I am a board member of the Waunakee Area Public Arts Commission. My group of 5 put together the art piece in front of the Waunakee High School, and we're currently working on a $500,000 piece in the town of Westport on Highway M, which is heavily traveled. So we are going to be entering some fundraising at some point in time, but we're expecting to put a $500,000 art piece on Highway M. So I do support the arts. Every city I go into, and you know, the facts that are presented here are correct about Wisconsin is one of the worst states in the country when it comes to supporting public art. So, and public art means many things. So it's not just what I'm doing. It's not necessarily what great Waunakee is doing, but it's a lot. It's music. There's a lot of things to art. So I am in support of this, and I understand, and I do agree, there's got to be accountability back to the board of what's happening. So the other thought I had in response to you is Renee, and I'm sorry, I'm going through an episode. Sorry. Can tourism dollar be used for this Create Waunakee? Because it is, in fact, drawing people in. As we did when we did Oktoberfest, we drew a lot of people in from the outside. Now, whether it's in the hotel or not, I don't know the answer to that question, but it is part of tourism, bringing tourism to Waunakee. So just another line item that could be used in that concept.
And I will say that there's 30% of the room tax money, I believe it is, can be used for, you know, it doesn't have a designated purpose in the legislation. So, you know, some communities use it for, you know, just helping their general fund. We've always kept it in there. We've done other things, the flowers. But as we grow and maybe get more hotels or more stays and that number grows, I mean.
Yeah, if you recall from our research of the Bowles Center, some of the organizations we studied that we wanted to emulate were majority funded through room tax for their arts organizations. That would be a good goal.
And the 30% that you're referring to, Renee, is the administrative from the village's standpoint of what they could keep for administration of the tourism tax. It doesn't have to be used for that purpose. 70% has to be used for tourism. The 30%, you have some discretion on what you can use that money for.
Correct.
All right, Sarah?
I support the idea behind this as well. I am concerned about the sustainability as well, and like I prefer to see like a three-year plan versus even just 2 years. As I do a lot of fundraising myself, and I know that can fluctuate significantly, and I oversee a nonprofit as well. And I know this isn't at that stage, but seeing that 3-year plan and Al's idea of seeing that budget, I think that would help a great deal. Because I see it as, you know, they have $80,000 and, you know, if nothing happens, that could be gone. So I do support the position, and I support the arts. I was in the arts for many, many years. But I have the similar concerns about the continuance.
All right, Tom?
Just a couple of things. This is gonna work well and be a great idea to get this started, I think. I think it's really gonna help. A couple of things that like Kristen talked about. There is a budget management provision in your development director job description where you could easily add securing sponsorships and grant funds and other funding where necessary. That's in the budget management portion of it. In the main focus area, you've got designing fundraising events that support the organization's financial sustainability. You could also add obtaining grant funds to support the organization's financial sustainability there at that spot as well, which I think make sure that it's known to the person that gets this job. Hey, we got to do this. And I'm on the board of a small foundation where we actually wrote it into the job description of the person we hired that they would be raising funds to pay their salary. So it's something to consider.
Just so they know right up front that, you know, they might have to pay themselves first.
Yeah, I think
So-
that's totally the intent. So that's very helpful feedback to tighten up that job.
So
description.
that's all I have. Good luck with this. Thank you. All right. Paul?
Just definitely in support of adding new role to create Waunakee. Looking at many of the events that personally and my family attend. So really excited for this, definitely in favor. I don't necessarily have any additional comments or questions. I think the group has covered many of them. So thank you for being here.
I would just say I'd like to spend some time with Renee and the Create Waunakee Inc. board over the next 2 weeks to do things and modify the presentation or the content related to our existing budget and maybe a multi-year lookout to garner more support from the board as we look at this over the next couple meetings.
Nice to go.
Oh, I'm sorry, Aaron.
No, it's good.
Absolutely.
I really appreciate being able to hear things and I'll try to make it quick, but it's awesome to hear like different voices talking about the viability of this. It's just neat perspective to be on the committee, not involved with the Inc. so much. That's only been around for 4 years and you know, it's like as we've been growing this, which is a product of many, many years of hard work in the village and throughout the community, it's just such a neat step. And I have my own uneasiness of, you know, how do we make sure this is sustainable in our support? Because I mean, the 7 of us, we could have a completely different board within 2-3 years. So making sure that the village's commitment is sustainable, no matter who is, you know, representing the village, I think is just how can we make sure the transition away from financially being supported by the village, both with, you know, donations like this, but staff time, event space, like all of these things. Yeah, just a 1-year thing is a little worrisome for me. Because yeah, what happens in a year if, you know, it's different makeup and there's not support, and then are we the ones that, you know, just kind of, I don't want to say the word kill, but like destroyed the organization. You know, I just don't want to be funding something so heavily us that's then like we're still supporting in other ways if it's not a seamless transition, I guess. It's not as coherent as that's why I need to read my notes, but yeah, I guess we just have work to do on like that, what that logistically is gonna look like to stabilize that funding. And I know a lot of these, like there aren't answers for, you know, staff or Natasha and the Inc. board, but just the questions I guess we have to ask. Cause I want the weaning off to be sustainable and, you know, like fly, you know, not, so I think, yeah, and just like the capacity of that role and how much like still be working with the village. So anyways, it's a long day.
Can I ask a question? I don't know if Natasha or anybody can, is there somebody in mind for this position? Like that if this was approved, is this something that, like, what's the timeline of filling this position, I guess is another question.
That's a great question. We want to get going as soon as we can, obviously, and I don't think there is a specific candidate in mind at this point. But I do think we have a very creative community, and I'm sure we can find someone pretty quickly.
I do know that I think there's definitely some talented people in our own community who are interested in the work that we're doing. I wouldn't be surprised if we have local interest, but we'd be doing or Create Waunakee Inc. would be coordinating a full-blown open recruitment to find the very best person.
So is it like safe to like if it were to be approved tonight, this would be something that would be filled in like 3 to 6 months, or is this more like 6 to 9 months? Is there?
Well, we'll know certain
thought
on the
behind it?
village's funding support by mid-November, November 18th. At that point, if included in the budget, Create Waunakee Inc. could begin with their planned approach to recruitment. And frankly, could be kind of poised to get going, but a good recruitment is usually going to take you 2 to 3 months. Maybe they could be a little more nimble as a nonprofit in that work. Natasha or?
Yeah,
Edgar?
I think that's our plan, is to get someone in as soon as we can. And, we are at the end of this year. So yeah, 3 months is, I think, what we're trying to target.
Okay, thank you.
Erin, did you have another comment or?
Yeah, but I'm gonna go on like a 5-minute thing. I think I just need to let these marinate. I'll ask next week.
I know it's $30,000 and I know the concern and I appreciate the concern. And I think we can address these concerns can be addressed. But I also want to come from a standpoint that I agree there's a lot of talented people in the village of Waunakee when it comes to art. But from my perspective of what I've done with the art and when I've hired people, you got to look for the best person. They're going to take you the furthest. They're going to get you where you want to go. And ideally local, but if you got to go outside, you got to go outside because, and if you got to pay them a little more, it's worth it. Because they bring a lot of talent to the table and take you to another level. So I would support you again, as I mentioned before.
Thank you.
Any others?
I think it might be helpful for us to have almost like an inventory to be able to see like how the village is supporting Create Waunakee with resources as we look at this, like what staff time and events, so that we know like what, yes, this is $30,000, but what are we expecting to eventually not be paying for with staff time and village resources? Because I don't know how we are going to be able to know that, okay, we funded this so that we're not housing this, but we still could be doing all those things. So I don't know. I want.
It's a good question and we sort of alluded to that more anecdotally than
Yeah.
factually. And we will have more context for this discussion for you at your next meeting.
I think, yeah, it's just to follow up almost with this will not be a village employee, right? This is
Correct.
Okay.
All right, I think we've wrapped that one up.
Yeah, we did good. The other things are things that Renee already presented in terms of impacts on the admin budget, the full year on our comms manager. We have an administrative intern now, a student from UW-Madison, pursuing city management. We had some carryover funds where we were able to hire that person. We'd like to continue that support. That position is supervised by the deputy administrator, really assists us with research and survey completion and a variety of other things that can help with some of the day-to-day moving parts of the administrator's office, as well as help generate that talent. And then we already mentioned the IT contract. That's a component to this budget.
Any questions for Todd? Before we.
Does the administrator's office feel it has the staff that it needs to do the job effectively?
We, with the approach that we're taking to some of these collaborations, as well as quite honestly, the board approval of the code enforcement support starting next year, that's a surprising load off of the administrator's office, which is really commingled with community development and others collectively. So I feel like this is going to be of benefit to the department. I know we talked maybe 6 months ago about additional HR support.
That's what I was getting at.
I can tell you that the communications manager that we hired, Kalen, has really taken it and run with it and has fully removed that obligation from Jared's role, and his focus to HR has really been returned in terms of capacity. So we're pretty happy with how that's played out.
I honestly couldn't remember if we had that in open session or not, so I didn't want to say it directly as HR. So you're
I
good.
just brought it in.
You're good. Yeah, that's fine.
Okay, moving on to the village board.
Just to touch on a couple of things here, a reminder, a nice picture, guys. several of you are going to be attending the league conference coming up. Is that this week? This Friday. That funding is available, and I'd continue to encourage board members to avail themselves of opportunities to connect in the state. One thing we're doing, this isn't a levy impact, but the board has set aside monies for a few years for board strategic planning. We've never really lifted that off the ground, and I think that's okay. And we're proposing a different use of those dollars, and that's to implement an inaugural committee volunteer appreciation banquet. We're looking at hosting that in February, working with the clerk's office to coordinate that, a way to recognize all who support the village and all of our committees, boards, and commissions. So we're going to propose a use of that funds that we've budgeted for strategic planning to accomplish that banquet. Do you want to talk about how Waun-a-Boom fits into the board's budget?
And Kristen's also prepared to speak as the chair of the Waun-a-Boom committee. But she asked us on behalf of the Waun-a-Boom committee to add 40,000 into the 2025 budget. There had been nothing budgeted in 2024. The last time anything was budgeted was 2023. And they've been supported by donations, and it carries over from year to year. But that was the request.
Yeah, and I'll be happy to explain that. So ideally, we raise enough money to cover the cost of the fireworks, the children's events, all of the expenses that we have. We did have an increase in costs this year and needed to dip into the funds for the first time. Those were involved in, we needed to, after many years of being up until 4 or 5 in the morning cleaning up after the event, we hired a professional company, 2 men in a truck, to take care of cleanup after the event, since the committee has realized we're not getting any younger. And that was hard after a couple of days solid of setup. So that increased our cost. We had an increased cost for fireworks due to inflation, but also the show that we had. We have had extraordinary lines for children's activities, up to an hour and 15, an hour and 30 minutes for the activities, which we offer free of charge to the children and their families. And we needed to add more children's activities in order to accommodate the increase in crowd size. So those were our 3 major expense increases. Our donations were on par with what we've had in previous years, but we do need to, and we recognize that, increase the number of donations in order to support the event. In order to do that, we did make a small investment in some marketing materials, some videography, some pictures and photographs that we're going to be using to increase our contact with our sponsors and hopefully solicit more donations. Ideally, this budget item carries over and we don't spend any of the money because we do achieve our fundraising goals, but we do need a bit of a backstop in case that we would fall short this year. We haven't fallen short. Again, it was just an increase in expenses due to the size of the event or the extent to which the event has grown. So yeah, that's the cost.
Yes, Nyla?
Okay, first of all, I'd like to say that I believe that our volunteers should be appreciated and recognized. And I also Waun-a-Boom, I enjoy Waun-a-Boom, I enjoy the fireworks. I'm glad we have fireworks in Waunakee. But at the same time, I've had residents ask me if it's appropriate that tax money be used for either one of these, and that's why I'm voicing this here. They said that, why would we support Waun-a-Boom? We don't support Waun-a-Fest. And Waun-a-Fest is also an aging group of people who put that on. And as far as the appreciation banquet, it's not that I don't think it's a good idea. I just am asking for the residents who ask me, should we be using tax funds for these types of projects?
Other thoughts?
I have a really controversial thought actually about Waun-a-Boom. The parking situation over there, because I don't know how much we expend on lamers for bus service, but I can tell you with some of the areas that they do pickups and drop-offs, there's like maybe 3 or 4 cars in there, and maybe the rest of it is like I walked to my stop. I didn't drive over there. Has Waun-a-Boom ever considered? I know that One Row is specifically for handicap disabled parking, but have they ever considered like or the village considered temporarily just, if you want to park closer that you got to pay and encourage people to park in the lots so that you get better usage out of Lamers by parking it since I'm assuming the school district is okay with people parking there, since those are the major pickup spots and things like that. It's not that I mean, we have a lot of people coming in from out of town that are doing it who will probably pay to park up there because they won't park it. But if you live in the village, it would really motivate you as opposed to just driving. I have driven and parked over there before in the past, so I'm just as guilty, but I'm just thinking it is a free event, but I mean, do you really have to make the parking free if we offer transit services?
I think that's an idea worth pursuing.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm not trying to
Yeah.
rain on anybody's parade. It's just,
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure Lamers isn't cheap.
Yeah.
Totally dangerous.
Pardon? The parking?
It also can be really dangerous for pedestrians, the way it's set up, so.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's an idea worth pursuing. I think our limitation would be how to charge, but that is maybe a way to get creative.
I mean, we already
So,
put up no
yeah.
parking signs all over the place for that.
Yeah, we
so-
do. Yeah, yeah. So the bus is full on the way out. So I mean, people are using the bus, but you are right there. I mean, the streets are clogged around there. Yeah, I never thought of that. So
All right, from a budget standpoint, anything else? Not
I
seeing
can
any.
never deny the money.
Oh, go for it.
My comment is, and I agree with Kristen, with Oktoberfest, the children that were involved in enjoying the event was phenomenal. And I know a while ago, there was always an article in the paper about everything we do is about beer. Well, it's not true. When I looked at Oktoberfest and when I looked at Waun-a-Booms, a lot of kids were involved in that activity. And that's perfect. It's a family function. So it's dollars well spent to get it going. Now, whether taxpayers should pay for it or not, I don't know. Is Waun-a-Booms organized as its own separate legal entity?
it is not, no.
And the question is, should it be similar to Create Waunakee? Should it be eventually weaned off of the budgetary process, or at least just a contribution to the event? In Waunafest, you're right, is aging. There's some concerns there. But I can tell you, Oktoberfest, we had our best year ever, and we had a lot of people from out of town for purposes of staying overnight, for eating at Culver's as well as eating with us, and we had a lot of out of town folks. And again, the kids were phenomenal. So it's hard to deny the kid when they look at you and they say, "Hey, can I have another?" How can you say no? So that's just my comment.
All right, anyone else? No?
I got some.
Oh.
Yeah, I think these are both appropriate contributions and uses here. The $40,000 for Waun-a-Boom that's a great event, and it's not like Waunafest where a lot of the groups are pulling money out of it. I believe that even the chamber it's the beer tent. Sorry, Al, but they're the people that are the personnel at the beer tent, and I don't think the chamber, they're all volunteer. I don't think the chamber pulls any money out for that like they would at their tent at Waunafest, where that's a major fundraiser for them there. And as far as the not that I wouldn't attend or anything, but as far as the event for people that are on committees and boards, we always had one of those at Westport when I was at Westport, and other communities they worked for did that. And they were always great to get people together and just talk about things they did. And also, I just went to one for Dane County Parks. Dane County Land and Water Resources held one for Dane volunteers at Dane County Parks. And they held it at one of their facilities. It was great because what happened was you had people that worked at all these different parks and they all got together, and it was like a recruiting mechanism, just because you talk about it, the people working at Schumacher Farm Park would say to someone that was at a different park, we do this and we do that. It was a great thing just to see the camaraderie, and it was a minimal cost. So anyway, Nyla, I just thought I'd reply to that, at least from my perspective, for what it's worth. Now, you will be having a public hearing, so you'll be able to hear from everybody in the village, and they can tell you what they think about all of these. Thank you.
All right, I think that probably wraps us up on that one.
Okay. Hopefully this slide goes fast. There's We don't have any representatives from the municipal court. But on their behalf, I will just say that there were just minor increases to the operational funding for the court. Any question? Okay. Moving on, village clerk, Carla.
I'm sure you'll have no questions, so I'll make this very quick. We have had the pleasure of having a LTE, Sue Passanato, work with us this year, and it's been amazing for election help. So I can't thank the board enough for approving that. So and one of the other things you've done is approve us to go to Archive Social and Optimize through Civic Plus. We are in full force getting Optimize ready to roll out for dog and cat licensing, which I know the entire community is going to love. And that's an understatement. I know they're gonna love it. And Archive Social, we've used that already for social media record retention, and we've already had a great success with that. The election officials, they have had the wages of $12 for an election of like a election inspector, and then a chief inspector has been paid $15 per hour. That is fairly low for the responsibility that they are undertaking and the amount of training and the responsibility that we require out of them. So we're asking to up that to $15 and $20 for the chiefs. Todd already mentioned this, the interim market update is going to take place with Associated Appraisal in 2025 and 2027. So that's all I have.
Any questions there?
I just want to give a plug for the election workers. That's a really, it's a tough job. They do a lot of really great things during the election. So it probably doesn't hurt to pay them a few more dollars. I'm free for the village, but everybody else I know gets paid.
I will just pop in here and say, we've been going at this for 2 hours and we're halfway through our packet. So I would like to move to take a very short recess of about 5 minutes.
I will second.
With a motion and a second, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right.
All right. Beat everyone to the back.
Call us back into session here. And I will hand it back to Renee to
Okay,
continue.
so community services is next. Sue?
Hello, good evening. So community services, we have a very pretty routine budget this year. We're just really busy playing baseball and floating pumpkins and doing anything fun that you can think of. I'm going to go to bullet points 2 and 3 first. One thing that we've been working on this year and we're going to continue next year is really transitioning all of our customer processes to onboard. We're trying to get rid of the binders and the paper, and we're making great progress there. So we're going to continue that bit of work. We are definitely working together to support the transition to the new village-wide building maintenance structure that's underway, and we very much appreciate that additional help that's being afforded to all buildings throughout the village. We are asking for one increase in our budget this year, and that is the addition of a recreation assistant / intern. Years ago, we used to have interns, and then we transitioned those positions over years to full-time roles. But as the village grows, so do the kids and the families that want to play and take part in our programs. For example, in 2023 alone, our department offered 765 different programs. More than 9,300 people participated over the course of the year. So there is a lot happening and going on all the time. So we are hoping to add back in some funding for recreation assistant intern, most likely to spend spring and summer with us when it's our busiest season. And we are so thankful for the board's support of the Centennial Park Playscape, which just opened this fall. Cute little picture of our office manager and her little pumpkin playing at it. So thank you for that.
Okay, any thoughts, Nyla?
I just want to say thank you, Sue, because from the time I got on the board and even before, I marveled at what your department does with this minimal staff and support that you have in many ways. And I think that your request is very appropriate.
Thank you.
Anyone else? We'll move on. Thank you.
I have a question.
Oh,
Sorry.
way to go, Al.
And that is in regards to the accounting policies or budgetary policies that we talked about earlier, there's always a reevaluation of the fees, users' fees of the various events you put on, whether it's t-ball or softball or whatever it is. But when was the last time those users' fees were reviewed in consideration for the rising cost of everything that's going on at this point in time?
That's a great question, Al. Actually, all the time, our fees are reviewed every time we create a new program. So my staff, for anything, any kind of program-based, we are 100% funding all of the direct costs of all of the programs that we offer, plus an increase to cover the overhead costs of our department. We also, in this year's budget, there is a new fee structure. And so all of our village center rental fees, our fitness pass fees, all of those things have been reviewed. And there have been some increases almost every year throughout.
I'm sorry, this thing is just, I can appreciate everything you do, so I'm not trying to be in any stretch of the imagination, but you know, this $754,000 in tax levy being apportioned to your department, as well as this year, you're gonna dip at 55,000 into your reserve. So based on the budget, so you're looking at $800,000 shortfall from the revenue minus the expenses, and that's what I was asking the question.
Okay, thank you.
All right, anyone else? Nope, we really are wrapped up this time.
Okay, community development.
I'm new, so I came in and spent all the money. So we're starting out with about $110,000, $115,000 total for comprehensive planning services, which includes Century Avenue visioning, which has been in the budget for a few years, putting some fund balance aside. We're going to take that fund balance, add it to the comprehensive planning services. So it'll be a grand total of approximately $140,000 for comprehensive planning services, including that master plan for the West Business District or Century Avenue area, as well as what I'm calling the Eastern Gateway, which is basically the business park entrance to the community. We're also doing a changeover to have our GIS information in-house at the utilities. And so the migration of the data plus the addition of a new asset management program is going to be split between my department, Public Works and Utilities. My section of that is 6250. We're adding funds for code amendments and any carryover to be used for a future zoning code rewrite. So if you've taken a stroll through our zoning code, it's old and kind of confusing, and some things just really need to be updated. So after we do the comprehensive plan, we'll have some funds set aside to do a zoning overhaul. The development bus tours in 2025, so we set aside about $1,000 every year for that. So it says $1,000, but there's $2,000 carryover. And we're anticipating that the room tax revenue can fully fund the chamber agreement payment this year. One thing I didn't put on this slide, and I apologize, is also the $50,000 for municipal code enforcement contract, to have someone come in and do our code enforcement for us and take a lot of pressure off of Tracy and myself.
All right. Any thoughts, questions?
I have a thought.
Go for it.
You know, we talked about the two previous more or less donations to create Waunakee and to Waun-a-Boom. And we also make a donation to the Waunakee Chamber of Commerce as well. But the hidden donation that we make is charging the Chamber of Commerce $600 for rent. That's been that way for 20 years. So there is a hidden cost as to an additional donation being made to them. And I'm not saying anything bad about it. It's just that it's more than what the check is written for. There's other facts in there too. So just another comment in regards to village participation in the various entities that are going on.
All right. Yeah, go ahead, Tricia.
Just one quick question. You had mentioned, the ArcGIS, that's your portion. Who's that all split with? Just out of
Public Works
curiosity.
and Utilities.
Makes sense. Okay. I didn't know if county was involved in that.
No.
That's fine. Okay.
And I will say thank you for the ArcGIS stuff. That's a well-needed move. Any other thoughts? Guess not. We'll move on.
Okay, finance. There's so little going on in the finance budget that I forgot to put in a slide, so I had to add that today with Kaylin's help. But really no additions. That's a nice picture of our department. And so that's 2024 now is the full year of having the deputy finance director on board. And any other increases are really just due to inflation.
Questions about finance?
Okay.
Not seeing any? You
Library.
good, Al? Good. Awesome. Moving on.
Nothing but good news from the library, so I'll be brief. So we are very fortunate this year in that we receive roughly 1/5 of our funds from Dane County. And we receive those as reimbursement for our services to non-residents. This year is the first year that their funding formula it's way too complicated for me to ever explain to you, is taking into account the new buildings years, throwing out 2020 and 2021, which were the COVID years. So we're finally getting our bump from the new building. So we're seeing that we're going to be making over $400,000 this year, well, next year, as opposed to $290,000 this current year. And that number should only increase from here. So that's a great starting point for our budget this year, and it's allowing us to kind of look at some of the things that we'd long wanted to do. We found that our starting wages for entry-level customer service staff had started to lag. So the library board and working with Todd and Renee, we reclassified those positions to a higher pay grade. So we'll be going from kind of the bottom third of county libraries to the middle, which I'm very happy about. And then it allows us to reclassify some positions. We're going to be creating a special event coordinator. We average 25 to 30 non-library events per year at the library. So we want to take that off of existing staff, have somebody who will handle that as their main task. And then, as we do every year, we're just adding more and more materials in our funds for our materials, so especially digital materials. So thank you for your support. Things are just really humming along, and very proud to go there every day.
Okay, questions? Just thumbs up, so that's.
Yeah, all right.
All right, next.
All right, PD.
I hope to be as thorough as Eric and not have any questions, but three areas to touch on for our budget. The first is $5,000 to a communication budget for translation services. You guys heard that is kind of blowing up in the village. Our needs have, it's been a large growing need in the police department. When we first started paying for translation services, we were paying like between $25 and $75 a month. Now we're up in like the 400s to sometimes $500 a month for those services. And we can no longer really absorb those within another line item. So looking to add a line item for that, or adding to the communication line item. The next one is $3,500, just as a growing department. Uniform needs, we replace bulletproof vests. Half of it is funded by a federal grant. Every 5 years, every officer gets a new vest. And then probably the biggest step is the $36,730 for kind of an overhaul, which was needed to happen anyways in our digital evidence, if you will. So body worn cameras, squad cameras. Right now, we have 8 body worn cameras for our entire department, and they rotate, which at times, you know, one shift is done, they put in the charger, it might be in the charger for 20 minutes, and then another person's grabbing it. It's hard to keep up with that. And then the other part of that is our squad video is on a rotation. So one camera's brand new and has different features than the other ones. And right now as well, we are storing everything in-house on servers. So we're looking to kind of make this large change to cloud-based service, going with a company that is going to provide body cams for 20 staff members. So that would be our patrol staff, frontline supervisors, and then would give an extra one for our part-time officers to share as well. It would, again, cloud storage. It would provide 8 cameras for our squad cars. They would come in and put all of that equipment in one go round. 2.5 years into what is essentially a 5-year contract, they'll replace all of our body worn cameras with updated technology. That's another benefit we're keeping up as that's moving along. And then part of a bigger switch too is the redaction software. So much more anytime you have more video, a lot of people want that in open records. The redaction software right now, we're using a pay per use service. We're burning it to CDs. We're taking time to do all those things. This allows us to redact within the program and literally just email it out while keeping a record of it. So that's probably the biggest piece. And then another part that will support that, which is part of our building addition that we'd like to do, is bring that same company in to do our interview rooms, which would eventually just bring all of our digital evidence into the same system for ease of use. Sorry, that was kind of fast, but.
No, that's all good. Questions starting down here?
Who's gonna argue with the chief of police?
That's fair. That's fair.
I'll take it.
Anyone else here?
Thanks.
Excellent. Thank you.
No pressure, Bill.
Next.
Okay, yeah.
Kind of hard to follow. Yeah, is Public Works there. Basically, we've got, I'll be having a full year with our maintenance, building and facility manager. So we've got that coming next year. The other part of this thing is we've increased the funding on our trails and alleys and basically in 2024, we rated all of our paths and alleys using the Petition system, the same system they use for roads, and determined that we've got several paths that are in need of some repairs sooner than later. So we've asked to basically increase that funding so we can try to get a start on that in 2025. The other thing is, for the past 3 years, we've been assessing our stormwater ponds throughout the village. We've done, I think it was around 5 a year, so we have 15 years worth of data. And in those 15 different ponds, we found we should probably start doing some cleaning and dredging. So we wanted to start our dredging program next year as well, to try to get ahead of our pond cleanouts so that these things will work the way they're designed.
All right. Well, yeah, start.
Go ahead. I just want to say thank you to Bill and his department. It's the department that makes it possible for the rest of the village to keep on moving, no matter what the weather or what the climate is. And thank you for that.
Not a critique or anything like that. I think these are good and needed. The question was more on future planning for stormwater pond maintenance as we get more with the new developments. Is that part of what's included in the development impact fees, stormwater maintenance, or is it something that maybe we should think about?
Something probably we should be thinking about.
Okay.
I'm not sure how that was.
It is not currently part of the parks impact fee, and we also have the community center impact fee. It's not part of either of those. I think it would be possible to implement a storm water impact fee of some sort. We'd have to talk with our consultants.
Something to think about for future.
Yeah, currently, this 300,000, well, this particular one for the 2025 budget was put into the borrowing, and it's in the 10-year plan to continue, kind of like streets that we borrow. But, could consider that.
All right, others?
Joe, just a comment in response to that. Usually in the development agreements, there's a provision for the developers to maintain those ponds for a while. I'm looking at Brian.
No, usually they have, well, sometimes there's stormwater maintenance agreements, other times they're not. They always have to build them. You can do impact fees for stormwater improvements though, so that is something to contemplate.
Just, it's something to think about in the future, you know, whether they want to maintain them or not. Just mentioning that because these are probably older ones though, Bill, aren't they?
Correct.
Some of them are older and it's good to see them cleaned out because then they're working properly, which we definitely need to have. And any further phosphorus might have been formed inside them is going to be taken out and properly taken care of. So thanks.
Just wanted to ask really quick, since this was the much heralded position on the building the facility manager, and I know it took a while for us to find the right candidate for it. Have we already had good feedback from the other buildings now that they're not having to do their own maintenance and beg for people to come over?
Yeah, I mean, he's definitely hit the ground running. He's involved in several different projects. We've currently had resignation, so he's busy working with that at the library, and we're busy trying to fill that, reorganize that area, which is something we'll be talking about in November.
Oh,
So,
okay. All right, thanks.
I'll also throw out there for the trail maintenance stuff, are we gonna end up seeing a list of those kind of like we do with street projects, sidewalks, all of that? Is that gonna come back or?
It actually was in that 5-year plan that we
Oh.
approved at last meeting.
Okay. Yep, that's it then.
I just got a quick question. As I look at the various line items within your budget, why is health insurance dropping so drastically between your various departments? You know, for example, just reading off the top, the actual for projected for 2024 is $80,000, but the budgeted for 2025 is $54,615. Why the $26,000 drop? And it goes on in other departments of yours as well. Is there a reason for that?
The thing that strikes me off the top of my head is that we, that line item also contains retiree HRA contributions. And so 2024 would have had several public works retirees in there. And they, once their sick leave bank has been all spent in HRA, that drops off the budget and they're allocated. So public works employees and are allocated amongst all of the things, parks, recycling, streets, snow. And so.
But when I look at street maintenance, just dropping down lower on the budget, I see the street health insurance of that 195 for 2024 down to 109 in 2025. I see the street equipment is at 20,000 dropping down to 11,006. So it's a pretty consistent drop within the health insurance, and that's about the big thing that I see.
My estimate, because I do that 2024 estimated myself, and looking particularly at street equipment, that looks a little high to me. I'm trying to think. I mean, I generally took the 8-month actual, and I estimated it out for 12 months. But if there were some of those other HRA contributions, they would be overstated in there.
Yeah, I don't mean to put you on the spot here, Renee. So it's just, like I said, if maybe you want to recheck that in every case to see if, and maybe you're right, maybe it is the 2024 estimated is over.
Yeah, I mean, it's not an exact science for me to come up with those numbers. I try and use a reasonable approach again for a lot of those lines, just taking the 8-month actual and extrapolating it out for 12 months. It doesn't always work perfectly if there was something that was again, those HRA contributions all happen in January. So for those employees that were received that, so it might be overstated, but I'll double check it.
Yeah, you might want to. Okay, thank you.
All right, anything else? Nope, moving on.
Cindy.
For the senior center, over the summer, we did a salary survey, to see what other police managers, what their salaries were at the other senior centers in Dane County. Dane County is the only county that has case managers on their staffs. And we found out that we were low and we were behind quite a few of the other senior centers. And so I am asking for that position to take a step up.
Mike.
I'm sorry. Should I start all over? Shame. Should I repeat all that?
It kind of picked it up.
Okay, so I'm asking for a step up for that position, for the case management position. So we come closer to the other centers in the county. This will also help us. We recently had one of our case managers leave, and it will certainly help us when we're seeking out someone for that position. The other thing is, from Dane County, we receive funding for our case management program and for our nutrition program. The preliminary funding that Dane County is showing right now is $3,740, less than this year. That still means if they stick with that amount, we will still receive $156,000 from Dane County for those services. I am being told from our contract manager with the county that she believes that if they do a COLA, the COLA for the county would be added back to this. And so it would bring it back up probably close to what we received this year. But of course, the county funding and the budget has to be approved before that happens. Anything else? Any questions?
Anyone? Go ahead, Tricia.
Just a clarification, Cindy, on that county funding, is that formula based or is it just based on their overall budget dropping or?
The nutrition program is based, they pull out the numbers for how many meals you serve on site and how many home delivered meals. And then case management, they have a formula for how many clients we serve.
So to extrapolate that, would that then mean that our usage has gone down?
Our congregate meal numbers have dropped. They were very good pre-COVID. They dropped dramatically right after COVID. We're slowly growing them up again. Our home delivered meals on that line, we actually went up in money because that service is growing. Hopefully over time, the congregate meals will get back up also to what they were prior.
Okay. Al?
Yeah, I have just a general comment, not particular to your department, and that is I've heard a lot and seen a lot and read a lot about all these HR type persons. Is there an HR person here that should be doing all that market study, salary study and all that kind of stuff as opposed to spending your time? And I mean, it's a broad question about, is it time to get someone on board who has that skill set as opposed to expecting Cindy to do her own market analysis.
For this past summer, we had an intern who helped do that. I had started putting together information 2 years ago and didn't get very far. And
Maybe you're a bad example.
So
Talking about everybody.
But we did have an intern who gathered some of the information also for this year.
The typical approach with departments is they'll partner with Jared in his HR role, and Jared will help walk through all the steps and provide support as necessary.
Okay. Any others, Paul?
Yeah, I just had a quick question regarding the budget. So looking at 2024 budget, you have Health and Human Services Senior Center Administrative Cost. There's a line item which is approximately $6,000 budgeted. However, it looks like year to date is 453,000, which is quite a significant variance.
Yes, that is the line. So the village board approved transfer of, so we had some donated funds. We called the Foresight funds because he bequested most of the funds to the senior center. And there was a 501c3 established, the Friends of the Senior Center. And Cindy came and talked about their process there. And so because it was the village is fairly restricted in what we can invest in. And some of the people involved with the bequests and making some of those decisions thought if they established a Friends of the Senior Center, similar to we have a Friends of the Library, they could have a manager of the funds and also help Cindy make decisions on what those funds would be used for. So I can't remember what meeting that was at, but it was several meetings ago where the board approved transferring those bequested monies to the Friends of the Senior Center. And there wasn't really a good line to put it on. So that's why that's such a huge amount.
Thank you.
All right, anything else?
And thank you for your continued support of the senior center and our services.
Thank you.
Okay, EMS, Scott.
Green, got it. Appreciate that. So I know going into 2025, it's a pretty large increase that EMS is asking. What we ran into, the biggest increase that we ran into is the contractual addition of an employee. In 2024, we came to a collective bargaining agreement with our employees. If you recall, that was a 0% increase last year. And in return, they go from a 56-hour work week down to a 52-hour work week in 2025. And we do that through an additional employee. So we go from 12 employees to 13 employees next year. And then the insurance and pension cost increases, those went up approximately, let me check the number here, just over 8%. Not a whole lot that we can do about that. We're currently in the state pool. We are going to spend 2025 looking at some, I call it health in lieu. It's not true health in lieu options to be able to offer in hopes of bringing that line down a little bit. The part-time and overtime cost increases, you'll see those are some fairly large ones. We do have a couple of planned surgeries, as well as another employee that's going to be out for a while next year that we know that's going to end up having to help cover. To help balance this a little bit, so we do actually charge fees for our services. We did increase, as a part of the approval of the budget, increase the user fees by $200 for transports. It's a bit of a misnomer when you look at that. Out of our roughly 2,000 calls a year, only about 13,000 of them, or excuse me, 2,000, almost 1,300 of them get transported. And of those, about 70 to 75% are either Medicare or Medicaid. So if we bill out, our new rates are going to be at $1,950 for a transport, we'll see about $360 from Medicare, Medicaid. So this is mostly to help make up the difference when it comes to commercial insurances and whatnot. The other interesting part, and I apologize, do you guys have our budget in front of you? I'm not sure if it was.
I
in
did
the
not
packet.
include the full budget in the packet.
Okay. So I'll try to explain this without seeing the numbers in here. But our total budget itself went up approximately. Well, I have them in front of me. I didn't know if you guys had them in front of you. Oh, that's okay. You can all share with Robert. So the total budget itself goes up about 9%. What ends up happening is our call volume is not increasing at the rate that the budget increases, which is where then your guys' portion ends up going higher than the actual budget itself. We try to get as close to 50-50 as we can, 50% funded through taxes and 50% funded through user fees. This year, I think we're still a little bit over 50% on where that's going. We're looking at about 1.15, 1.16 million in revenues to help offset the total cost of the budget. So we are looking into fees and how we can increase some of that stuff. We are still hoping, there's a program out there to increase Wisconsin Medicaid reimbursement rates. I think I've been talking about it for about a year now. The state has approved it. We're waiting for the federal government to approve it, and nothing seems to happen at any kind of speed with the federal government. So we're still waiting on that approval to help us out a little bit. Otherwise, that's really kind of where we are in a nutshell.
All right, Nyla.
Currently, how many full-time and part-time employees do you have?
Full-time, including the management, we are at 14.
Okay,
Part-time, don't quote me on this, we were at 15 last I checked. Might be 16. I know we just brought a couple on. I'm not sure if they have gotten through their probation or not.
okay, so does administration or management go to EMS calls?
When we're there, if we're able
Okay.
to, we do try to help out with that when we can.
And does the EMS still have volunteers?
Yes, we do.
How many?
Approximately 20 to 23.
And are they doing shifts, or exactly how do you utilize them?
So they are pulling shifts. They hop on the schedule kind of like they always have. Most of them now are actually in either med school, or we're sponsoring them through paramedic schooling to come up. And then if they do end up being sponsored through the paramedic school, they have to sign a contract with us for 2 years after licensure to continue to run with us for those 2 years afterwards.
Okay, at one time, the EMS had volunteer drivers that were strictly drivers. Do you have any drivers at this time?
We do not have any driver only.
Is it because people haven't applied and weren't interested in that position, or because you aren't looking for those people?
It's not something that we're looking for right now.
Okay, thank you.
Mhm.
Okay, anyone else over here? Nope. On this side?
I'll do my, now, second year of doing this, just to remind everyone that Village is a part of a 6-member board that makes up this district. The Village does contribute the largest share by far, and we also see the largest increase in share or cost because of that share. So the Village is a very significant portion of this, and we do watch costs. Unfortunately, the state, or I'm sorry, the federal government has not done us any favors with their funding, and costs do just go up. That's just how it works. So we do try to be very, when we meet as a board, we do try to be very conservative with, I know Al doesn't like that word, but I mean, we don't engage in unnecessary spending. Like, everything actually has a purpose in spending. So just wanted to share that, since we don't really talk that deeply about it here.
Okay. I think that pretty well wraps up that one.
Thank you. And fire.
Hi there, I'm Brian with Waunakee Fire. And along like Scott, we have about proposed roughly a 9% increase in our budget this year. The majority of it is going to be into our truck account. We are in the process of currently paying for an apparatus we haven't received yet. We will receive in 2026. And we're anticipating the purchase of a ladder truck in 2029. We keep most of our large trucks 30 years, so that truck will be 30 years old in 29. And we're anticipating the cost of that truck to be close to $2.5 million. So what we're trying to do with our truck account is make sure we're covering the cost of what we're paying right now and preparing to have a little money tucked away so when it comes time to purchase that truck. We have also increased our vehicle maintenance. We have contracted with the village mechanic to do our truck maintenance. 2024 was the first full year that we've done that, so we were kind of shooting from the hip on what that was going to cost us. And we do see that we need an increase in that in regards to mostly preventative maintenance. And then the last thing we got on our budget there is just basically our office miscellaneous and our accounting. We work with Baker Tilly and they raise their prices, and we're gonna come up a hair short this year, but we've got it covered, and now we're making sure we don't come up short next year. So.
All right, starting on this side. Any questions?
No questions, thank you.
It's beautiful.
All right, moving right along. Nothing over here? All right,
That's perfect.
easy enough.
No questions for fire. I'm gonna see if I can catch the tail end of fire drill yet tonight.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Fun.
Thanks to all of our participants. Now back to me. I'll try and move through these relatively quickly. We've already talked about some of this stuff. In our policy discussion, we talked about the policy to maintain our unassigned fund balance between 20 and 25% of the next year's operating budget. With the 2024 projection as I have it now, we would land at about 29%, which is really about the average we've been the past 5 years. The next slide will show some strategic ways that we're planning to use some of that excess fund balance to reduce the tax levy. So here is some of the proposed items to apply fund balance to pay for. Generally, these are one-time costs or things where money has already been set aside for them. The equipment replacement enhancement of $100,000. What that means is that we would transfer $100,000 from the general fund balance to the equipment replacement fund. We're seeing vehicles and equipment going up in price, and still some things are hard to get, and we have to order them in advance, and they're just costing more. And so this is just to kind of beef up our equipment replacement and slowly, instead of raising the levy to cover all of it, use some fund balance to ease that in as we see those costs continue to increase. The next bullet, the use of carryovers. So we have some what I call ongoing carryovers. That's for the retirees for their sick leave conversion. We have an amount set aside to fund that. We still have some of our assessment carryover from prior to adopting our 5-year contract. We budgeted for it a little bit differently. We have some of those funds that we're going to apply, and then elections has a fair amount of carryover. We do expect that with the presidential year, we're going to use some of that, but we're also going to apply a little bit of that to the 2025 budget. Some other things, particularly in the community development budget, the Century Avenue visioning, some of the some ordinance funds that were budgeted, and that work had not been done yet, and some marketing work. Those were assigned at the end of 2023. So we're going to use those. Joint venture stabilization. So that was some money we had set aside. Again, we want to use some of that to ease in the fire and EMS increases that we've just learned about. And then some other one-time costs, about $222,000, use of fund balance for things that have been talked about already, the GIS migration, the comp plan, some records transfer at the PD. We have to, or we're being recommended to migrate our Microsoft account to a governmental account. And the sustainability planning that was approved by the board, and the Waun-a-Boom money would be paid for out of fund balance. So I don't know what that is. Oh, okay. Sounds like a buzzer, like stop. So that's using about close to 700,000. And then that would project to bring our fund balance down at the end of 2025 to 26%. So closer to our range. Some other significant things that I wanted to note, we talked about the equalized value. So the village's equalized value went up 8.61% in 2024. That's pretty comparable to the rest of Dane County, which was 8.4% of an increase. It's down a bit from last year. But that, it's still very strong. And in 2024, as of 1/1/2024, all personal property was removed from both the equalized values and the assessed values. And anything that was not exempted by the legislation last year is added to real property. So personal property will be no more. So we've absorbed that, and we still increased almost 8.5%, 9%, and puts us very close to our 5-year average. And what that does for us, one of the many benefits is that it increases our debt capacity due to the statutes. I wanted to point out the we're tied into levy limits, but we did experience some increases that we can use to raise our levy. Our net new construction was about 3.9% this year. Last year it was 2.6%. So we had another strong year of construction. So we were able to add 445,000 to our levy capacity. And then TID 3 closed, and that added about 136,000 to our ability to raise the levy. I did want to point out, as we're talking about the levy limits, I've been working with Ellers the past couple months or weeks really to update our 10-year financial management plan. And in there, they kind of, they project out the 10 years and then they look at where we are within the levy limits. And the current projections show that that we'll be fine within the levy limits until at least the year 2028, the budget year 2028. And obviously a lot can happen between now and then. But what would happen at that point, we still wouldn't need to go out for a referendum. As you've heard, other municipalities are, Madison, a lot of Fitchburg are doing that this year. Our next step would be to increase our borrowing for our pay-goes like streets and borrow more and reduce the levy for those things. So we have, the legislature forces us to, it's a benefit to borrow more because you can then raise your levy more. We wouldn't be looking at talking about a referendum for a number of years under our current projections.
I just said good news.
Yeah.
So that's great news.
Joe, I'm going to suggest something to the village board, that even though Renee is awesome at handling this and Ellers is also really good at handling this, before you get behind the 8 ball, you should have some type of meeting where you're just talking about that and how you're going to handle that. And sooner rather than later. A lot of communities, I think it might have been Monona Grove, it might have been Monona Grove School District, really got behind the 8 ball, boom, like that, they got caught. And you're seeing a lot of the communities that they're talking about financing. Sun Prairie doing a local municipal vehicle registration fee. Oh, sorry, wheel tax. So there's things that you want to get in front of rather than knee-jerk reacting, where a lot of communities are, and then you really find yourself trying to deal with getting a referendum passed when the school district may be doing it at the same time. So some planning is really in line, and you got good people to help you, so you should think about that sooner rather than later. Anyway, sorry, just had to throw that
Oh,
in.
good point.
Excellent point. Any other thoughts? Continuing on.
Okay. Debt service, I guess the story here is we're well within our debt service policies. You can see from the graph, the bottom section is our projected debt. You know, we try and keep that pretty stable. Ellers helps us with that. The next area up is what our policy would allow us to borrow. So we have quite a cushion there. And then the state imposed limit is the very top line, which, you know, we're so far off of that. It just shows our debt policies are working and we're strong there. In your packet was a detailed listing of the 5 years of equipment requested. I just did a high level summary here by the larger areas. Some fluctuations, particularly public works or parks, or even public safety, really just depends on what year, maybe a big piece of equipment, a dump truck or something needs to be replaced. But yeah, nothing too strange here. And the capital improvement plan, this 2025 is should be fairly familiar. In last year's budget presentation, we had 24 and 25 together because we do a combined borrowing, which we did earlier in 2024. So the budget is pretty much the same as what we were projecting in our longer term plan, with the sort of the anomaly from a typical year of the police department addition being in there for the 2025 budget.
This is that, that chart that I suggested earlier that you would be seeing where we do, well, it's pretty small, isn't it? Where we do look over the past 3 years and where we have landed in actual for comparing our equalized tax rate with every city and village within Dane County. We've definitely sat pretty well in that bottom third, even less into the bottom quartile on those equalized tax rates. And hopefully after the education session earlier in the meeting, you can really appreciate how meaningful that is for our approach to taxation in Waunakee. We included there the projection in the proposed budget, the projected equalized tax rate should keep us down into that same sort of position in comparison to our other communities. And I'll continue by acknowledging the time spent by the team and the department heads and the finance director. I'll tell you that every number in this budget proposal that you've seen presented tonight has a lot going on behind it. From the departments and reviewing their budgets to the checking and double checking and triple checking that I know Renee and her team do in finance to make sure that what you're seeing is as accurate as possible. It's an impressive amount of work done, and I'm really proud of the team that we have and what we've shown you here tonight. So job well done. And then for all of you and your time that you take to be diligent in reviewing as well.
Yes, and Todd's time and assistance with the process, and the meeting with Kristen was very helpful. So thanks to everyone.
All right, and with that, we move to any discussion that's needed here, I think.
Yep. Right. Any other questions? And just, you know, as we move through the budget process, we have that rule of thumb about every 10,000 change and that impact.
I would say a lot of times over the course of the year, your departments are always taking notes on what they might hear from you in committee meetings or in board meetings or in general conversations. And we try to pick up the hints and capture what you might be wishing for within the budget. But this is definitely the time if there's something you don't see or wish to be different. We have time to change the budget proposal. And now is a good time to bring that up if you want additional consideration at your next meeting.
Right. Or, you know, if something strikes you after you go home and get a good night's rest, you can email me. You know, again, we'll have a little bit different version at the next meeting, and then at the final meeting, you know, it's we want the input and the input of the citizens when they come in and speak as well.
And it's okay for us to just toss it out to you at 2 a.m. when we're still sitting here, right?
Right.
Yeah.
I have been taking some notes, so as has
Excellent.
Todd.
We'll just kind of go around, and I'm thinking I'll start with Sam.
I don't have anything additional.
Excellent. Tricia?
Yeah, no, I think everything that we've talked about, I can't think of anything else right now.
Okay. Nyla?
I'm fine with what we've discussed and I don't have any additions.
Excellent. Thank you. Paul?
Just want to thank the finance team here for the Village of Waunakee and everyone else who showed up this evening. So thank you. No other questions.
I don't have anything either. I think we discussed things. This budget's certainly ready to go to public hearing and hear what other people have to say.
Excellent. Sarah?
Yeah, I have nothing additional. I think we've discussed everything pretty detailed.
And Al?
I think the department heads did a fantastic job, and I'm glad you guys painfully sat through this whole process. for us.
All right. Robert?
Just want to thank finance and all the department heads who came out and sat through this, and yeah, looking forward to the next hearing.
Excellent. Aaron?
Similarly, just so thankful in this moment for the staff that we have that puts this all together.
This is an enormous project to get this ready and to put the presentation together. Thank you all for all of the work you've done, and Renee for leading this very, very big process, and Todd for everything you've done to make it happen. If it's all right, I would like to make a motion to direct staff to publish the notice as required by state statutes indicating the proposed budget is available for public view.
Second.
That's a finance committee
Yeah.
motion. I'll be happy to answer it.
So
It's on the finance.
motion's okay.
Wait, I am on it.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
It's me. I'm the problem.
I'm happy to second it.
Okay, we'll get another second.
Only recommend.
Yeah, that's all we're doing.
9 o'clock at night.
But so yeah, clarification on that. Are we, as the finance committee, are we directing staff or are we recommending?
We're recommending
We're
To the
recommending.
board?
the board directs staff to do.
All right,
this.
we are recommending.
We're recommending the board direct staff.
Direct staff, thank you very much.
Okay,
Yeah, 9 o'clock at night. Yeah,
so we've got a motion to recommend to the board to direct staff.
yes,
Okay,
to direct staff.
we have a second?
Publish-
I did.
And we've got a second from Tom. Okay. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? And that carries. Okay, so
So now I guess you have to have a village board.
I will move that we direct staff to publish the notice as required by state statutes indicating the proposed budget is available for public.
And I'll second that.
All right.
all right, motion and a second. Any further discussion?
I should be handling this. Yeah, yeah.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. So any further discussion on the motion,
Yeah, we didn't specify the date, of the motion.
the date of the motion?
We didn't specify the.
Sam was
date
too
of the
eager to second it.
So-
Clarify that.
Oh, yes.
Public hearing is November 18th.
Yeah, public hearing by in.
November 18th, 2020.
Friendly
Yeah.
amendment.
Those don't exist, but I will motion, since it already is a second, I'll motion to amend that we add that the public hearing is November 18th, 2024.
Second.
There you go.
All right. Do we have to do 2 votes then, Brian?
So you're acting on Robert's amendment right now.
Okay. All those in favor of accepting Robert's amendment to the motion, to schedule a public hearing for November 18th, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye, opposed, motion carries. Now on to Aaron's motion. All those in favor of directing staff to publish the notices required by state statute indicating the proposed budget is available for public review, please specify with the amendment, please specify by saying aye. Aye, opposed, motion carries. All
Okay,
right.
so having done all of that, I believe we have one more motion for the.
I'll
Finance
move the
Committee.
finance committee adjourn.
I'll second.
We've got a motion and a second.
All those
All those
in
in
favor?
favor?
Not me,
Okay.
it's you.
Finance is adjourned. I will move that we take a 5-minute recess to reorganize the room.
Yeah, that sounds good.
Second.
Yes.
And a second,
There's more
all those in
All
favor?
in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Good.
Awesome. Thank you. So we'll call a meeting back to order at 9:15 PM. I would like to make a motion to move business item 1, discuss and take action on awarding the bid for police department addition project up to before the consent agenda.
Second.
All right. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. The floor is yours.
Oh, thank you. It's way past my bedtime. I'm gonna have John, our architect, talk about the steps that we've taken here, but just to touch base, the police committee did meet and review the bids last week, Tuesday, Joe and Nyla, I think, and Sam, I think it was last week, Tuesday. And made a motion to support taking and agreeing to the lowest bid. And then leaving, there is an alternate bid in there for some solar panels and leaving that discussion and decision ultimately to the village board. So I'll let John talk about the process and he could probably answer your questions better than.
Yeah, John Wallen, Camp Cuny Architects, 7305 West Wisconsin Avenue. As the chief mentioned, bids were received. We received 7 bids. Very good coverage, so that's really leads to several thousands of subcontractor bids. So I think we got a very good coverage on the project. Low bid was Pepper Construction at $4,115,069. They list 229 days to complete the project, or 226 days. If you look at the bid tab there, there's a spread all the way to 300. It's really up to the contractor to put together their schedule. The schedule will come back to the chief and the board to look at, depending on the delivery of equipment. That was the base bid. Alternate bid was for solar panels at 182,000 and some change. There's a high and a low there. You can't jump up and down categories from different contractors. So there's some questions of why some other ones were low. Reaching out to some of the subcontractors on that, not everybody potentially covered all the scope. So during bid day, the contractors got to take the most qualified bid that they receive. They're open for some discussion on that. I think the solar panels really got to be looked at as a global thing. Right now, the utility of the facility is about $12,000 a year for electricity. Bumping up to a larger building, we're seeing that maybe getting to maybe 16,000. So about 50% of that, we see the solar to capturing. So if we can save $7,000 or $8,000 a month, literally we're at about 22 years for payback. So I can tell you it's right at the range of municipal government. We would say 25 years. But with solar panels, their life expectancy is right at about that 20. So it's kind of an interesting piece there. That's assuming nothing goes up with utility costs, which we all know it's going to happen. So I really think the system, we can look at more in depth to see if there's some savings there yet, but I think it's right on the edge where it makes sense. All the structural pieces that go into the building for the solar is already in the base bid. The type of roof membranes already in the base bid. So either way, if this is something that the village doesn't do today, it's something that can be added on in the future. The roof, all that, like I said, is in the base bid, so that doesn't go away. That does leave contingency on the overall project, about $173,000 for contingency. There are 2 major items that we still haven't bid, is the furniture and the radio, and they're line items in the total bid, total project budget. But as other projects we've been bidding, we see those have been falling right in line with what we estimated the last couple of years too. Any questions?
Yeah, Nyla.
Under description, the last item, builder's risk, what is that?
Yeah, builder's risk, and that price is actually in the general contractor's price. That's the insurance piece. So when the building's being built and items are being put in place and paid for by the village, they're technically under your ownership. So that covers if anything happens to that equipment after it's been installed and you've paid for it.
Okay, thank you. And then I have one other question pertaining to the solar panels.
Yep.
Would the solar panels that would be installed cover the energy needs for the entire building?
No, so the solar panels, I should touch on, are only going on the new roof area. The existing roof structurally won't handle it. So everything new that we've created around new mechanical equipment would be solar panel ready. So that's about little over a third of the roof can have solar panels. And on an average, that would take care of about 50% of utility cost.
Okay, other questions, Nyla?
Thank you.
Tricia?
I guess my only one, I'm trying to think if I've seen Pepper do any projects in Dane County. I know they've done some in Milwaukee. Is there, I mean, maybe I just don't, if that's something in common on just familiarity with the area, just given the long list of bidders and the others that are more commonly seen around the area.
Yep, good question. So CUNY Architects have not worked with Pepper either. So we did do some background checking on. Pepper is a major large company out of Chicago area. They started a division in Madison a few years ago, they said, and they also started in Milwaukee. So they're heavily bidding the competitive bid market, which this job was. Otherwise, a lot of their other work was negotiated work. Most of their subcontractor lists are from the Madison and this circumference area too. But their Madison office would be the location that be servicing this work.
Any other questions, Tricia? No, Sam?
I don't have any additional questions. I think, the police committee, we did not make a recommendation on the solar panels because we wanted the information that was provided here. Obviously, we are at that, limit again where it makes sense. And I do think it's something that we should seriously consider doing, because it's at that number, perhaps, why not? I would say.
All right. Thank you, Sam. Aaron?
No, Tricia asked my question, which was answered.
Joe?
Nothing. No, I had a question about the subcontractors, but I see that's included in here, so we're all good.
Robert?
Supportive of the solar panel option. Otherwise, no concerns.
Okay. I'm also supportive of the solar panel option, given the direction we're going as a village. I think, even if it just washes out as cost, I think that it's important for us to consider and undertake projects like that. So with that, do we have any other questions?
No, I'll make a motion.
Right.
Move to accept and award the bid from Pepper Construction in the amount of $4,115,069 for the Waunakee Police Department Building Addition. And we'll leave that motion at that.
All right. So we're not putting additional money in for solar panels.
It says here additional motions may be made regarding alternate one.
Yeah,
So
I
would
figured
assume
we'd deal with the
separate
solar
motion.
side.
All right. All right. I will second the motion then. All right. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. We have a second motion.
I will make the motion to approve alternate one of the Pepper Construction bid for installation of solar panels.
I'll second it.
Any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. All right.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for coming today and for waiting through our meeting. Yeah. All right, on to the consent agenda. Do we have anything we would like pulled from the consent agenda? No?
I'd like to pull I don't have the agenda in front of me, but number 7, thank you.
And I'll move approval of the remainder of that, then
Second.
1 through 6.
All right, all in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Item 7, Robert, would you like to?
Sure. So thank you to Village President for having this item put in here for recognizing Native American Heritage Month and flying the Ho-Chunk Nation flag at Village Hall. I just wanted to make sure that we pulled it out so we could give it special recognition. I'm not going to read through the entirety of it, and I would invite the village president, if she so desires, to read the land acknowledgement statement.
I will as soon as I can find it in my packet.
All right, it's, sorry,
170? All right, thank you. Furiously
I
paging
didn't
through.
want to take that away from you.
No. All right. All right, so recognizing Native American Heritage Month and flying the flag of the Ho-Chunk Nation at Village Hall. So the following is, I'm sorry. Here is as is our tradition for Native American Heritage Month. We want to recognize the Ho-Chunk people and our relationship with the original people of this land. So the village of Waunakee acknowledges that the land that we occupy is Tejope, ancestral territory of the Hochara Ho-Chunk Nation, people of the sacred voice. Hochara are the stewards of these lands and waters since time immemorial. Settlers attempted to forcibly remove them from their homelands by exploiting a series of land cessations and treaties, including the Treaty of 1832. However, the Ho-Chunk resisted these conquests and asserted their sovereignty as a nation. We address this trend of dispossession by upholding the Ho-Chunk way of life, sovereignty, culture, language, and environmental practices. Acknowledging these atrocities is only the first step towards reconciliation. Through relationship building, education, and action, the village will advocate for a shared future with the Ho-Chunk Nation. So
Did you already vote on it?
we did not.
Oh, I was just gonna add a couple things. One, I was invited by the representative from the Ho-Chunk Nation President's Office to join them on a panel at the League Conference on Friday to talk about relationships, both the challenges of developing them as well as the successes. So I'm looking forward to that. Also, when we do raise the flag, I've been instructed on proper etiquette related to the gifts the nation had given us of sage and tobacco. So we will ceremoniously burn some of the sage and sprinkle some of the tobacco during the flag raising. So pretty neat. Well, the relationship we've built and what we've all learned.
Thank you. Thank you. So with that, do we have a motion?
Well, motion to authorize the display of the Ho-Chunk Nation flag above Village Hall during November 2024 in recognition of Native American Heritage Month.
Second.
All right. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Right, next item on the list then, reports and announcements. First item under here is Community Development Authority. We moved this from earlier in October to October 23rd, so we will be meeting this Thursday night. All right, next up, Create Waunakee.
I was gone. Sorry, I'm also so tired. You might have a more thorough update than me. I don't know if you were there either, but.
I think we went over the outcomes from WAM,
Yeah.
which had a very successful event. We talked about some of the other events coming up. There's a
Just like, yeah, lots of little things. Trunk or treat just happened last week and, holiday things, the partnership with the Piggly Wiggly. There's like a craft while you shop once a month where they have live music too. So.
Thank you. Next item, EMS Committee.
Yes, EMS met last Thursday. We are continuing to work on the study with Middleton. We did have a kind of protracted discussion about the presidential candidate visit. Just the logistics, actually they learned a lot from that process. They learned what worked, what did not work. They learned some important takeaways about the EOC that's probably better suited over at police rather than the fire department. So it was good. They got to work with Secret Service. It turns out Secret Service just tells you what you're going to do. You don't get to tell them anything. The other part that I would point out is that there has been some longer discussion about where the EMS district covers. So Generally with EMS, it's whoever can get there faster is the preferred method that they use for figuring this out. So of question is on the west side of our area is Don's Mobile Home Park. It probably appears more that Middleton EMS and fire can get there faster than we can. So there is a chance that that will move out of our district and go over to EMS as far as Dane County Dispatch is concerned, which does mean a slight decrease in revenue when that occurs.
Thank you. Library board.
So we met last Friday, recently. We met our new facilities and maintenance manager, Jeff. We talked about some of the projects that are going on. Obviously, our staff member there is leaving, so making sure that transition goes smoothly, as well as some of the improvements we'd like to see for the grounds there.
Thank you. Next up, Plan Commission. So Plan Commission looked at the installation or the site plan for installation of a chiller at Octopi. We discussed an action by Presbyterian Church to rezone part of the town from A1 to G1. We discussed and took action on that request to amend the GDP and the site improvement plan and annexation of lands to be recommended to the Joint Plan Commission and the Village Board. It'll come to us after Joint Plan Commission. We also discussed and took action on the site implementation, excuse me, we'll just say SIP, plan for family development, multifamily development in Woodland Crest. We reviewed the beekeeping ordinance, and we discussed and recommended a comprehensive plan services RFP that we'll be reviewing tonight. Joint Plan Commission was canceled for lack of quorum. Has it been rescheduled, Lauren?
It has not. We were unable to reschedule it with the town, so we will be putting it off to the November meeting.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. And then Police Committee.
We met last Tuesday, the 15th. Standard stuff, did a department update from the chief, and then had a great discussion around the bids for the PD addition and remodel that we just approved.
Excellent. Sustainable Waunakee Ad Hoc Committee was canceled. The Wednesday that we have been meeting, third Wednesday, fourth Wednesday of the month, has not really worked out for a lot of committee members. So we're currently looking for a better standing date throughout the month so that we can meet more regularly, because we have canceled quite a few meetings for lack of participation.
I know this isn't back for discussion, but can I just ask really quickly, does this take out from the total count of meetings that we have when these get canceled, or are you gonna like add them in for the back end of it? Since we only wanted it to be for, I think, 24 months.
We only, that's a good question. I think that'll be up to the board. If we are able to produce the report in time and the report should not be delayed.
Okay.
Most likely we'll still want to end on that date, and not because we want to end on a specific date, but because I imagine, I'm going to look at my fellow committee members, that report delivery will then prompt another round of action. We wouldn't want to delay that.
Okay.
So yeah, we'll just have a busy few months if we've got catch-up work to do. Yeah, but thank you for the question. Right, there we have it. Report. Well, any other reports or committees that I have not, or any announcements? No. Who among us is going to League of Wisconsin Municipalities meeting? I think is it two of us. You'll be there, Todd. You'll be. No. Okay. All right.
I
Excellent.
hope to, but I don't want to hobble. So
Oh,
maybe
we'll
next year.
Report back. We'll report back on November 4th then. All right, then on to the next item. Discuss and take action on issuing an RFP for comprehensive planning services. And I believe this is to you, Lauren.
Yes, let me bring this up. Oh, I don't need to share.
Oh.
I just needed to bring it up on my computer. So at the September 16th Village Board meeting, we talked about Dane County Planning Division doing an update to our housing chapter. At the October 7th meeting, staff brought forward an agenda item to instead just completely move up the whole comprehensive plan update to issue an RFP this fall instead of at the beginning of the year. The board voted to send that to Plan Commission. Plan Commission looked at the attached RFP, didn't recommend any changes. And so we're bringing the RFP to, they recommended unanimously to bring it to Village Board for approval. So that's what we're bringing to you tonight is an RFP for comprehensive planning services.
All right. So what questions do we have on the RFP? Let's start with you, Erin.
Nothing right now.
All right. Sam?
No specific questions.
All right. Joe?
Doesn't appear that it's changed from plan commission, so I'm good.
All right. Tricia?
No, no questions.
Robert?
I have one quick question. Given that we no longer probably have the same future use that we had from the last comp plan because of the incorporation or potential incorporation of the town of Westport, does that impact how they look at the scope of services? Like, can we, does it impact that at all? Or was that just because we did it jointly with them last time that we even looked outside of the village proper?
No, we have a planning jurisdiction up to 1.5 miles from the village borders. So
Even if they
unless-
become a village?
not if it's incorporated.
Okay.
So of any unincorporated area, we have up to 100 or a 1.5 mile planning boundary. What we would probably do is continue with our existing planning boundary because the petition to incorporate for Westport is even by their fact sheet says it could take up to 18 months.
Okay.
So unless there's something that changes during the planning process, and then Brian can correct me if I'm wrong, we would probably just continue planning the way we would with regular unincorporated areas.
I think that probably makes sense because it is such a long process. And at the end of the day, then even if the village approves a new comprehensive plan and then Westport incorporates, you always have the ability to take a look at the plan and say, do we need to change it at all? It may not need to be changed because there's still going to be other areas that are within towns adjacent to the village that would still apply.
Okay. Thank you.
I have one correction. Section 7 of the RFP, the dates, page 203, the dates need to be moved back a year. Because it implies that we're not starting this process until a year from now when we're already underway. So we can fix that.
Yeah, it says October 22nd, 2025. Yeah. All right. All right, Nyla, do you
Apologies.
have any questions?
No, I don't have any questions.
All right. Seeing no other questions or any discussion, do we have a motion?
I'll move to recommend approval of the request for proposals for comprehensive planning services with the date changes as mentioned by Sam.
You just want to. I think that was probably a carryover from the motion at the plan commission.
Oh, yeah. So it's a motion to approve the request for proposals.
I'll second that.
Yeah.
All right. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. All right, next item on the agenda, discuss and take action on potential additional funding for the Waunakee Child Care Provider Assistance Program. And is this you, Tom? Or Renee?
I'll start it. Robert is going to talk about it as well. So well, you've seen the board summary sheet and you've known the process, but the applications were due September 30th. And I plugged them into the spreadsheet for all the ones that we received. And it was just shy of giving all those applicants 2 months worth of assistance. And so I recommended and talked with Robert and Todd to see if we should appropriate some additional funds to get it to 2 months worth for all those providers. Something else that happened today is that Lauren received a call from the after-school programs, which there's an after-school program at Heritage, Prairie, and Arboretum, saying that they just received the application. Though we had sent 3 separate applications to the school. I believe Robert had provided the addresses that DCF had on file. And so we sent one to Heritage, a separate one to Prairie, and a separate one to Arboretum. And so they were inquiring if the period was closed. We got it later in the day, so we have not responded. So I just wanted to add that in there. Anything else you want to add, Robert?
No, we had discussed how to address that with the board. So just my personal opinion on it is it's unfortunate, but the way that it works, the after-school programs, I believe, are all Wisconsin Youth Company, so it's the same contact for all three programs. And while one of the letters had to get forward because it still had the old Heritage address on it, the provider was, the letters were sent to the two other. I struggle a little bit with reopening the window for them because we had pretty high participation, like greater than those who even participated in the state program, participated in our program. So it makes it a bit of a struggle to say that we should reopen the window. At this time, unfortunately, I would say that it's probably past that point that we should be considering it. And I spoke with Renee. The first question I asked when it came to putting the gap in the funding was, how does this impact our remaining projects? We did look at the impact of remaining projects, and this would not impact anything else that was designated for ARPA funds, especially since we're coming up on the end of the year and we have to have everything assigned out anyway. So I endorse fully, bringing in the extra funds to do it, but I would not reopen the window for the 3 after-school programs.
Okay, all right. Other thoughts, Joe?
No, I think this is good.
Okay, Aaron?
No, I'm glad that we are doing this, and yeah, I'm happy that the turnout is as great as it is. Great as it has been.
Sam?
Agreed with what Robert stated, and it was nice to get some great press for this program.
Yeah. Trisha?
All good.
Nyla?
I think it's a good program, and I hope that it helps many programs be able to deliver quality childcare to many children.
All right. I agree. I'm glad we're doing this. Do we have a motion?
I will move to approve use of an additional $4,536 for the Waunakee Child Care Provider Assistance Program.
I'll second it.
Any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. All right, next item up on the agenda then, discuss and take action on the town of Westport notice of intent to incorporate petition. The village board may convene in closed session. Well, do we want to present
Okay,
first?
okay, I
Okay,
guess-
Go ahead.
If I may, I
Yes,
was
you
just
may.
saying, we have 2 closed session items. I don't think that we have anything on item 5 that we would be prepared to discuss in open session. I can give you an update on the Westport notice of intent. That being that the town has filed its petition. Per the statute, the town attorney did ask the court to set a hearing. So the hearing before the court at this point has been set for December 4th of this year at 9 a.m. I think Lauren had mentioned on one of the other items that the town's fact sheet indicates that this could be up to an 18-month process, which I definitely think is possible. If you look at the statutes, effectively, even if all steps are taken immediately following one another, there's a court hearing, there's a hearing before the Incorporation Review Board, and then potentially referendum. So it is a process that can take a while. At our last meeting, the board did reconvene in out of closed session into open session to authorize village staff to allow the village to become a party in the proceeding, which we have a right to by statute. That has not yet been filed yet. That doesn't need to be filed until prior to the hearing, so prior to December 4th. I think that might be something that we want to discuss a little bit more in closed session, because it may be, well, I'll just leave it at that. And so I can certainly answer any procedural questions you might have about the incorporation docket before the circuit court. But I think is what, the information we wanted to share in open session. And then there's no information at this time to share in open session on item number 5.
Okay. And so in order to go into closed session on both items, do we take 2 separate motions?
I would read number 4 first, take a motion, and then read number 5 and take a motion.
All right, so number 4, the village board may convene in closed session as authorized by Wisconsin statute 19.85 LG for the purpose of conferring with legal counsel for the village, who is rendering oral or written advice concerning strategy to be adopted by the village with respect to litigation in which it is likely to become involved. The village board may reconvene in open session and discuss and take action on the subject matter discussed in closed session. So with that, I would like to, oops, I'm missing the motion here.
I would move we convene in closed session on item 4.
Right.
Second.
All right, and let's do a roll call vote.
Nyla Fry,
Yes.
Kristen Rungy,
Yes.
Trisha Brown,
Yep.
Robert McPherson,
Yes.
Joel Zisselsberger,
Yes.
Aaron Moran,
Yes.
Sam Kaufman.
Yes.
All right. On to item number 5, discuss and take action on possible acquisition of property at 205 South Klein Drive, the former Waun-a-Clean property. The village board may convene in closed session as authorized by Wisconsin statute 19.85 LE for the purposes of deliberating or negotiating the purchasing of public properties, the investing of public funds, or conducting other specified public business wherever competitive or bargaining reasons require a closed session. The village board may reconvene in open session and discuss and take action on the subject matter discussed in closed session. So I would like to make a motion that we go into closed session to discuss item number 5.
A second.
Any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, roll call vote.
Sam Kaufman.
Yes.
Nyla Fry,
Yes.
Robert McPherson,
Yes.
Kristen Rungy,
Yes.
Joel Zisselsberger,
Yes.
Trisha Brown,
Yes.
Aaron Moran.
Yes.
All right. As of 9:45, the board will be in closed session.